Story 1. I left my home and went to live with my uncle. Because my parents didn't want me to study years later, when uncle left me all his inheritance, my parents also wanted to share it. I'm a 22-year-old guy living with my parents and younger brother in a small town called Millbrook. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and family traditions run deep. My family has been here for generations, working the same jobs, living in the same houses, and following the same routines from as far back as I can remember. I've always been different from the rest of my family. While my dad and brother could spend hours tinkering with car engines or fixing things around the house, I was always more interested in books and learning. I remember being 5 years old and begging my mom to teach me how to read before I started school. She thought it was cute at first, but as I grew older, my parents started to see my interests as a problem. My whole life I've wanted to study and make something of myself beyond the confines of Millbrook, but my parents have always pushed me to work instead. They say education is a waste of time and money, and that I need to contribute to the family income like everyone else in town. Books won't put food on the table, my dad would always say. He's worked at the local steel mill for 30 years, just like his father before him. It's honest work, but it's also backbreaking and dangerous. I've seen how it's worn him down over the years, how his hands shake from the constant vibrations of the machinery, how he comes home covered in grime and too exhausted to do anything but collapse in front of the TV. The thing is, I'm not built for that kind of work. I've tried, believe me. When I was 16, I spent a summer working at the mill with my dad. It was a disaster. I was slow, clumsy, and constantly making mistakes. The other workers would laugh at me behind my back, calling me professor, because I was always asking questions instead of just doing the job. I've tried other jobs too. Stocking shelves at the local grocery store, mowing lawns, even a stint at the fast food joint on the edge of town. But no matter what I do, I always end up exhausted and miserable. My parents don't understand this at all. They constantly scold me, calling me lazy and worthless. My dad even says I'm not a real man because I can't handle hard work like he does. You need to toughen up, he'd say, his voice gruff with disappointment. The world doesn't care about your feelings. It's about putting in the work and providing for your family. My younger brother, Mike, is the opposite of me. He's 19, strong, and good with his hands, always helping Dad with repairs around the house. He dropped out of high school last year to work full-time at the mill, and my parents couldn't be prouder. They praise him constantly, which only makes me feel worse about myself. I've always been more interested in books and learning. When I was a kid, I used to sneak out to the local library and spend hours reading. Mrs. E. Johnson, the librarian, would always save the new arrivals for me, knowing how much I love to learn about different places and ideas. I dream about going to college and becoming a teacher or a writer. I imagined living in a big city, surrounded by museums and theaters and people from all walks of life. But whenever I mentioned this to my parents, they'd laugh it off or get angry. College is for rich people, my mom would say. People like us, we work with our hands. That's how it's always been. There was a time when I thought I might have an ally in my mom. She used to be a voracious reader herself, always with a paperback tucked in her apron pocket. But life and work wore her down too, and now she spends her evenings watching reality TV shows, too tired to even pick up a book. Last week, everything changed when my grandfather passed away. He was my dad's father, and they hadn't spoken in years due to some old family feud. I never knew the details, but it had something to do with my grandfather disapproving of my dad dropping out of school to work at the mill. The funeral was a somber affair, with half the town showing up to pay their respects. That's when I met my Uncle Jack for the first time. He's my dad's younger brother, and he left home when he was around my age. He hadn't been in contact with the family since. I overheard my parents talking about him before he arrived, saying he was a disgrace who abandoned his family. Thinks he's too good for us now, my dad grumbled, living in the big city with his fancy job. When Uncle Jack showed up, I was shocked. He was nothing like I expected. He wore a neat charcoal suit that looked expensive, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence I'd never seen in anyone from Millbrook. During the funeral, I noticed him watching me closely, a thoughtful expression on his face. After the service, while my parents were busy talking to other relatives, Uncle Jack approached me. He asked me about my life, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone was actually listening to me. I told him about my dreams of studying and how my parents kept pushing me to work instead. Uncle Jack's eyes lit up, and he shared that he had been in the same situation when he was my age. His parents, my grandparents, had tried to force him to work in the family business, but he wanted to study. So one day, he packed his bags and left for the city. He told me how he put himself through college, working part-time jobs to pay for his education. It wasn't easy, but he eventually graduated and built a successful career in finance. Now he owns his own investment firm in the city. I was amazed by his story. It was like looking at a version of myself who had actually achieved his dreams. Uncle Jack must have seen something in me, because he made me an offer that would change my life. He invited me to come live with him in the city. He said he'd help me enroll in college and support me while I studied. I couldn't believe it. It was everything I'd ever wanted. When I told my parents about Uncle Jack's offer, all hell broke loose. They accused him of trying to steal me away and turn me against them. My dad called Uncle Jack all sorts of names, saying he was selfish and had abandoned the family. "You want to leave us too?" My mom cried, tears streaming down her face. "After everything we've done for you?" But I knew this was my only chance to escape and pursue my dreams. So, despite my parents' anger and my brother's confusion, I packed my bags and left with Uncle Jack the next day. The drive to the city was quiet at first. I was lost in thoughts about what I was leaving behind and what lay ahead. Uncle Jack seemed to sense my turmoil. "I know it's not easy," he said, breaking the silence, "leaving everything you know behind. But sometimes we have to make hard choices to grow." As we drove, he told me more about his own journey, how scared he was when he first arrived in the city, how overwhelming everything seemed. But he also spoke about the excitement of learning new things, of meeting people from all walks of life, of gradually building the life he had always dreamed of. "It won't be easy," he warned me. "There will be times when you'll doubt yourself, when you'll miss home so much it hurts. But if this is really what you want, it'll all be worth it in the end." It's been a week since I moved to the city with Uncle Jack. I'm still adjusting to the busy urban life, but I feel more alive than I have in years. The city is everything I imagined and more. The towering buildings, the diverse crowds of people, the constant hum of activity. It's exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Uncle Jack lives in a spacious apartment in a high-rise building. My room has a view of the city skyline, and I often find myself staring out the window, still not quite believing that I'm really here. Uncle Jack is helping me prepare for college entrance exams. We spend our evenings going over practice tests and discussing different subjects. He's patient and encouraging, never making me feel stupid when I don't understand something right away. I know my parents are furious with me. They've been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between guilt-tripping me and threatening to disown me. My mom's messages break my heart. She keeps asking if she did something wrong, if this is her fault somehow. My dad's messages are angrier, calling me ungrateful and accusing Uncle Jack of brainwashing me. But I'm standing firm in my decision. I need to do this for myself. I can't go back to feeling trapped and misunderstood. I can't give up this chance to build a different life. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. Uncle Jack has given me a chance to break free from the cycle of expectations that was suffocating me back home. I hope that one day my parents will understand why I had to leave, but for now, I'm focusing on building the life I've always dreamed of. Am I wrong for leaving my family behind to pursue my education? Should I have stayed and tried to make things work? I'd appreciate any advice or similar experiences from others who have been in this situation. Update 1. It's been 6 months since I moved to the city with Uncle Jack, and a lot has changed. I wanted to give you all an update on my situation. First off, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and encouragement meant a lot to me during those first difficult weeks away from home. Living with Uncle Jack has been an eye-opening experience. He's become more than just an uncle to me. He's a mentor and a friend. Every day I learn something new from him, not just about academics but about life in general. With Uncle Jack's help, I managed to enroll in a local community college. I'm taking general education courses while I figure out what I want to major in. The classes are challenging, but I'm loving every minute of it. It's amazing how different learning feels when you're doing it because you want to, not because you're being forced to. My favorite class so far has been Introduction to Philosophy. The professor, Dr. Martinez, is this energetic woman who makes us question everything we think we know about the world. It's so different from the rote learning I was used to in high school. We have debates in class, and for the first time in my life I feel like my opinions are valued. Uncle Jack has been incredibly supportive. He's helping me with my studies, teaching me how to manage my time and money, and even introducing me to his colleagues in various fields to give me an idea of different career paths. One thing that surprised me about Uncle Jack is how he never married. He told me about his past relationships and how his dedication to his career often got in the way. It's made me think a lot about work-life balance and what I want for my own future. Uncle Jack shared a particularly poignant story about a woman named Sarah he dated in his 30s. They were together for 3 years and even talked about marriage, but in the end, Sarah felt that Jack was more committed to his work than to their relationship. I thought I could have it all, he told me one night over dinner, but sometimes you have to make choices. I chose my career, and while I don't regret it, I do wonder sometimes about the road not taken. As for my family back home, things are still tense. My parents have stopped calling every day, but they still reach out occasionally. The conversations are always strained. They keep asking when I'm coming back, telling me I'm wasting my time and money on education. My mom tries to guilt-trip me by talking about how much they miss me, how empty the house feels without me. My dad, on the other hand, alternates between anger and dismissal. When you're done playing student, he said in our last call, your job at the mill will be waiting for you. My younger brother, Mike, though, has been surprisingly supportive. We text regularly, and he seems genuinely interested in hearing about my new life. He even mentioned that he's thinking about taking some night classes at the local technical school, which is a big step for him. There have been moments when I've doubted my decision. City life can be overwhelming sometimes, and there are days when I miss the familiarity of Millbrook. The constant noise, the crowds, the fast pace of everything. It can be a lot to handle. I miss simple things too. The smell of pine trees, the sound of crickets at night, Mrs. Johnson's smile when I check out a new book at the library. There are days when the homesickness hits me hard, and I wonder if I made a mistake. But then I remind myself of how miserable I was there, how trapped I felt, and I know I made the right choice. I think about the future I'm building for myself, the opportunities one have now that I never would have had in Millbrook, and it gives me the strength to keep going. Uncle Jack has been helping me work through these feelings. He shared more about his own experience of leaving home. It wasn't easy for him either, but he said the hardest choices often lead to the greatest growth. One of the most challenging aspects has been making new friends. I was always a bit of a loner back home, and the city can feel isolating at times. But I've started joining study groups and attending some campus events, which has helped me meet people with similar interests. There's a guy in my philosophy class, Alex, who I've been hanging out with lately. He's from a small town too, so he understands a lot of what I'm going through. We often grab coffee after class and talk for hours about everything from our hometown experiences to our dreams for the future. Financially, things are tight but manageable. Uncle Jack is covering my living expenses, but I've taken a part-time job at a local bookstore to contribute what I can and save for my future. It's not always easy balancing work and studies, but it's teaching me valuable time management skills. Working at the bookstore has been a dream come true in many ways. I'm surrounded by books all day, and I get to talk to people about literature and ideas. It's so different from any job I had back in Millbrook. My manager, Lisa, is incredibly supportive of my studies and always makes sure my work schedule doesn't conflict with my classes. As I look back on the past 6 months, I'm amazed at how much I've grown. I'm more confident, more independent, and more excited about my future than I've ever been. I know I have a long way to go, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm on the right path. I'm curious to hear from others who have made similar life changes. How did you handle the guilt and doubt? And for those who have been estranged from family, did you ever manage to rebuild those relationships? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 2. It's been 5 years since my last update, and I have some significant news to share. I apologize for the long silence, but life has been a whirlwind of changes and challenges. First, the good news. I graduated from college last year with a degree in business administration. It wasn't easy, but with Uncle Jack's support and my own determination, I made it through. I even managed to land a job at a startup company right after graduation. The journey to get here wasn't smooth. After community college, I transferred to a 4-year university. The workload was intense, and there were many sleepless nights spent studying or working on projects. But I loved every minute of it. I joined the debate club, wrote for the school newspaper, and even studied abroad for a semester in Spain. That semester abroad was a turning point for me. It opened my eyes to how big and diverse the world really is. I made friends from all over the globe, tried new foods, learned bits of new languages. It made me realize how limited my worldview had been growing up in Millbrook. Uncle Jack was there at my graduation ceremony, beaming with pride. It meant the world to me to have him there, especially since my parents refused to attend. They still hadn't accepted my choice to pursue education, even after all these years. I invited them, of course. I even offered to pay for their travel expenses, but my dad refused outright, saying he wouldn't celebrate me wasting years of my life on useless knowledge. My mom was softer about it, but she still didn't come. She sent a card, at least it was something. Now for the difficult part of this update. 2 months ago, Uncle Jack passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. It was a shock to all of us, and I'm still struggling to come to terms with the loss. Uncle Jack wasn't just my uncle. He was my mentor, my supporter, and in many ways the father figure I never had. The last conversation I had with Uncle Jack keeps replaying in my mind. We had dinner together to celebrate my new job. He was so proud, kept saying how he knew I had it in me all along. "You've come so far," he said, his eyes twinkling. "But remember, this is just the beginning. Keep learning, keep growing. The world is full of opportunities for those who aren't afraid to seize them." I never imagined it would be the last time I'd see him. The next morning, his housekeeper found him in his study. The doctor said it was quick, that he probably didn't suffer, but that's little consolation when I think about all the things left unsaid, all the advice I can no longer seek from him. In the wake of his passing, I discovered that Uncle Jack had left me everything in his will. His house, his savings, his investment firm. All of it was now mine. I was stunned by his generosity and the responsibility that came with it. When I called my parents to inform them about Uncle Jack's passing, their reaction was not what I expected. Instead of expressing condolences, they immediately started asking about the inheritance. They wanted to know how much money Uncle Jack had left and insisted that, as his family, they were entitled to a share. I was shocked by their greed. These were the same people who had cut ties with Uncle Jack years ago, who had criticized his choices and called him selfish. Now that he was gone and had left behind a substantial estate, they suddenly wanted to claim a part of it. My dad's voice was gruff on the phone, with an undercurrent of excitement I'd never heard before. "So how much did the old man leave behind?" "Must be quite a fortune, eh? We're family too, you know, we deserve a share of it." My mom chimed in, her tone syrupy sweet, so different from the cold silence she'd maintained for years whenever Uncle Jack was mentioned. "Sweetie, you know we've always loved you. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. Don't you think it would be nice to share this blessing with your family?" Their words made me feel sick. I remembered all the times they dismissed Uncle Jack, all the cruel things they'd said about him, and now they wanted to profit from his death. When I told them that Uncle Jack had left everything to me, they became furious. They accused me of manipulating Uncle Jack, of turning him against the family. My father even threatened to contest the will in court. "You ungrateful little," my dad sputtered, his voice rising with each word. "After all we've done for you, you think you can just take everything for yourself? We'll see about that." My mom's approach was more subtle but no less manipulative. "Honey, think about what this money could do for the family. We could finally fix up the house, maybe even help your brother start his own business. Don't you want to help your family?" Their reaction made me realize that nothing had changed. They were still the same people who had tried to force me into a life I didn't want, who had belittled my dreams and ambitions, and now they were trying to take advantage of Uncle Jack's generosity. I made a difficult decision then. I told my parents that I would not be sharing the inheritance with them. I explained that Uncle Jack had left his estate to me for a reason, because I had chosen to follow in his footsteps, to value education and personal growth over blind loyalty to family expectations. Uncle Jack left this to me because he believed in me and the path I've chosen, I said, my voice shaking but determined. He supported me when you wouldn't. I'm not going to dishonor his memory by giving away what he worked so hard for to people who never appreciated him. My parents didn't take this well. They yelled, threatened, and tried to guilt-trip me, but I stood firm. And when they tried to force the issue, I did something I never thought I'd do. I cut off all contact with them, just as Uncle Jack had done years ago. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. I couldn't keep trying to please people who would never understand or support my choices. The weeks following this decision were tough. I second-guessed myself constantly. Was I being too harsh? Should I have tried harder to make them understand? But every time I remembered their greedy reactions, their attempts to manipulate me, I knew I had made the right choice. So here I am now, at a new crossroads in my life. I'm grieving the loss of Uncle Jack while also trying to manage the responsibility he's left me. I'm learning to run his investment firm with the help of his longtime employees, and I'm determined to honor his legacy. It's overwhelming at times. There's so much to learn about finance and business management. But I find myself thinking of Uncle Jack often, imagining what advice he would give me. Take it one day at a time, I can almost hear him say, "You're smarter than you think. Trust yourself." I've also been thinking a lot about what I want to do with this unexpected wealth. Uncle Jack always emphasized the importance of giving back, of using one's success to help others. I'm considering setting up a scholarship fund for kids from small towns like Millbrook who want to pursue higher education but lack the means. As for my family, I don't know if we'll ever reconcile. Part of me hopes that one day they'll understand why I made the choices I did. But for now, I need to focus on building the life that Uncle Jack helped me start. My brother Mike still reaches out occasionally. He seems torn between loyalty to our parents and understanding my position. I hope that in time he'll forge his own path too. I'm sharing this update because I know many of you have been in similar situations with family and inheritance issues. How did you handle it? Did you ever regret cutting ties with family over money? Any advice would be appreciated as I navigate this new chapter of my life. Life is full of unexpected turns, and I never imagined I'd be in this position. But I'm grateful for the opportunities I've been given, and I'm determined to make the most of them. Uncle Jack believed in me, and I won't let him down. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Parents gave my $75,000 college fund, left by Grandpa, to my golden child sister for her business. I sued them and got kicked out, but now the truth is out, and karma has struck back hard. I 18F am going through a very tough time in life. Not that I had an easy life before. My life has always been tough thanks to my narcissistic parents and their golden child. I have an elder sister, Mandy, 24F. She's the problem of my life. From my earliest memory of childhood, my parents have been biased towards Mandy. Thanks to them, I never had a happy childhood. My sister wasn't a bully, I would say, but she's shrewd and opportunistic. She left no opportunity to exploit our parents' feelings and get away with what she wants. Well, I don't blame her. My parents have made it this way. She's their firstborn. She has a special place in their heart. But hey, I'm also their daughter. I know many parents have their favorite kid. That's fine until you don't make your other one feel unwanted. That's what my parents did, made my life miserable. I felt like a spare part in the house. I mostly got to wear my sister's discarded clothes because it was too new to be thrown away. I played with my sister's toys because, again, why should they waste money on new toys when my sisters were still in good condition? I remember it was only during Christmas that I got a new dress. And that too because they didn't want to look bad in front of Grandpa and other guests, so avoid getting judged by friends and relatives. I used to get one set of dresses, shoes, and other accessories on Christmas, while my sister got as many as she wanted. If I ever complained about it, Mom would reason, Don't be impatient. Your sister's stuff is going to come to you next year. That's right, but as secondhand. As a kid, I bought their logic, but when I actually started understanding the situation, I created a fuss about it. I was either told that we were too poor to afford new sets for me, or I was grounded for my behavior. I don't ever remember Mom asking me what I would want for dinner or cooking my favorite food. It was always about my sister, be it Christmas, Thanksgiving, or any other occasion. The menu was as per my sister's taste. Once I rebelled about it and didn't eat the food and stormed off the dinner table, I was grounded and starved until I apologized to everyone and did the dishes for that entire week. Oh, it's so tiring to narrate my sorrow tales, but this is how it is. And you know why my parents, particularly my mom, do this to me? It's because of her sister. My mom has suffered from narcissistic parents, so she ensured to become one. You see the irony. Mom is the eldest of 2 of her siblings. She says her parents pampered the younger one and spoiled her badly. Mom suffered the biases from her parents, so she decided not to pamper the younger girl but the elder one. I feel Mom sees herself in my sister and treats her the way she wanted to be treated in her childhood. You know that kind of feeling. By the time I passed out of elementary school, I grew so resentful of my parents and my sister that I started spending my summers with my grandpa. He was the only one who truly loved me. My grandpa was not very fond of my mom. I think he was able to see through my mom's preposterous behavior. Maybe that's why he always rooted for me. The year I completed elementary school, Grandpa invited me to stay with him at his farm. I felt so relieved. Never had I felt so free and relaxed. Grandpa got me everything I asked for. Guilty of saying this, but I fully exploited his love. I asked for everything I couldn't get at home. Dresses, Barbies, doll houses, video games, and every stuff I used to be craving, but my parents didn't get it for me. I loved spending time with him at his farm, amidst nature. He had a poultry farm and a small stable with 4 to 5 horses. He spent his days on them. Life was so fun in those many days with him. I never wanted to come back home. When it was time for my high school, I insisted I'd get admitted to a school near my grandpa so I could stay with him. My parents were more than happy to get rid of me, so from freshman year in high school, I was put up with grandpa. It was needed for both of us. He was getting old and needed someone to help him out, and I needed an escape from my toxic family. I was in my junior year in high school when grandpa felt sick. Maybe he knew that his day was near, so he called everyone and disclosed his will. He gave his farm and stable to 2 of my uncles. He gave $150,000 cash savings to my dad, out of which $75,000 was for me for my college. He made me promise that I would complete my college education. Mom grumbled because others got properties and the farm while Dad got only some few grands. Grandpa reminded Dad had already taken his share of the property and sold it off to pay off his debt and start a business. Just when I started my senior year at high school, Grandpa passed away. It is the saddest day of my life. Now I have no one to fall back on. I had to move back with my parents. It was not pleasant. I hated it, so did they. As my graduation day is nearing, I asked my parents for my $75,000, which Grandpa left for me. I have to fill out college applications. That's when the problem started. Whenever I asked about my money or mentioned college, they would make strange faces and ignore the conversation. When I lost my patience, I put my foot down and asked them, "What's the matter? Where's my money?" That's when she said that they had given that money to my sister for her business. What the hell? That money was supposed to be for my college. They say it's no big deal. I can wait for a year because I'm still too young to go to college. I said, "Hello? How can I be young for college when my classmates of the same age are getting admission?" When they couldn't reason with me, they are pleading with me to give them a year's time to pay my college tuition. I said, "Why can't the golden child wait for a year to start her business? I can't waste a year. I need to know what options I have to retrieve the money. Any suggestions?" Update 1. A lot has happened in the last few months. My parents asked me to wait for another year. I didn't agree and pestered them for the money. They got mad at me and called me mean and selfish. They are gaslighting the situation. Not only this, my sister Mandy has started a campaign to portray me as the bad guy. I lost it when my cousin told me that Mandy is going around and telling everyone that I'm jealous of her business and want money out of her. I told Mom that if they don't give me my money, I'm going to tell everyone that they have gone against Grandpa's will and given my college fee to their useless daughter. Mom got furious and said, "Do you want to go that level? You better pay us the rent and have your own meal. Calculate the money we spent on you for 18 years. We are even." I fought back, like, what the hell? They are still feeding their elder daughter, who's 24, divorced with a child, and here they are being so mean and not giving me my money. I always got good grades, but they have never been proud of me, while their golden child brought shame to them, yet they are having her back. Oh, I didn't write about my sister. While I was living with Grandpa, my sister got knocked up by her boyfriend and got pregnant. By the time she tested it, it was too late to get rid of it. She had to inform my parents about it. They were disappointed, but there was hardly anything they could do about it. Mom, being a conservative Christian, got her married to her boyfriend. They both didn't want to get married, but Mandy had to because Mom left her with no other choice. Her boyfriend was anyway a bum. He never wanted to get married and take the responsibility of the child, but my parents chased him down after the baby. He abandoned my sister and her baby. My parents tried to nab him down, but he had evidence of my sister mentally abusing him. He sought divorce on this ground. My parents had to bring her back home. They have been taking care of Mandy and her child after Grandpa's demise. When I came back home, I found that it's Mom who's raising the kid because sister is often out. Sometimes Dad got furious at Mandy as to why she was leaving her child for Mom to take care of. Mom came running to her rescue, saying Mandy is busy finding a job for herself, so she's out. That's not true. I saw her so many times lurking around in the nearby cafes and parks with boys. She's a school dropout, so she's having trouble finding a decent one. Could I care less? When she couldn't get a job, she insisted on money from Mom to start her business. Despite all this, my parents still supported her. They gave her the money without even asking me. Until I posted here, I had no clue what options I had to retrieve my money except for asking them. So the next time I asked for the money and they pushed back, I said I would be suing them for violating Grandpa's will. Their faces turned pale. They understood I was no longer the girl they could exploit. After returning from Grandpa's, I had already started putting my foot down on their exploitation, and when I told them that I would sue them for money, they lost it. It was unbelievable for them. I was no longer the gullible and vulnerable little girl. Mom pulled out a notepad and scribbled the monthly expenses they had spent on me. I mean, that woman literally put 1/4 of the expenditure on my name and then the school fee and Christmas dress. I was in awe while she doodled it, and at the end she was like, "Forget about the $75,000. You owe us $200,000. Pay us before asking for your damn $75,000. I got into a heated argument with Mom and then stormed out of the house. After lurking in the block for an hour, I took a bus to my grandpa's house, where my uncle was living now. I asked for Grandpa's diary and took his lawyer's number. I called him up and explained the situation. I asked him if he could help me out. He assured me that I'm entitled to the $75,000 Grandpa left for me, and it was his responsibility that everyone gets as per the will. He said he would be sending an official notice to my parents to give me the money, and if they default, I can sue them. That's such a relief. The notice is going to reach them in a week. I'm happy to get help, but I'm equally worried about my parents' reaction upon getting the notice. God knows what they're going to do with me. Update 2. This is going to be a smaller one. Just wanted to let you all know you guys were so right that my parents are going to kick my ass. I was mentally prepared for the imminent. I spoke to my friend about sharing the condo with her. I took up a part-time job at a cafe. The pay is too low, but they let me have some leftover food at the closing hour. I had already packed my belongings a day before the notice arrived. As expected, my mom kicked me out upon receiving the notice from the lawyer. She abused me and threw my stuff out of the house. I made the mistake of not moving out before and letting them enjoy the pleasure of kicking me out. She said I was like a snake which they have been feeding in our backyard because I lived and survived on their money while planning on biting and backstabbing them. I yelled that they left me with no options. I cannot jeopardize my life and my career because of their narcissism. The lawyer had given a month's time to my parents to respond to the notice. They're about to breach the timeline. I think they're not taking it seriously because Mandy called and abused me for giving a tough time to the family. She said parents are not going to give a penny to me, and I cannot do anything about it because I don't have the money to sue them. I didn't reveal my cards to her. I silently heard her out, and when I could not take it, I hung up on her. I told my lawyer about it, and he said we can surely sue them if they don't respond by next week. Update 3. I suffered a severe backlash from my parents for suing them. Actually, I didn't want to press any felonies on them, but they left me with no choice. I thought that the lawyer's notice would do the job, but they didn't respond to the lawyer's demand. I went home to tell them that they better comply with Grandpa's will, else I'll have to seek a legal path. They ganged up against me, hurled abuses at me. My mom even threw things at me. I had left some of the non-essential items at home, thinking of taking them later. Mom pulled it out from my closet and broke it into confetti in front of me to hurt me. I was there to sort out the matter without a legal hassle, but it seems they wanted a fight. I came back and told my lawyer to press the charges on them. He happily did it. When they received the court order, they panicked. Dad called me and said we could sort out the family matters within us. There was no need for a legal battle. Really? So I went home to sort out the family matters, but they were the ones who turned hostile towards me and left me with no choice. Now the ship has sailed, and they have to follow a legal path. I'm not in for any compromise during the court hearings. Dad was asked to pay $75,000 as per Grandpa's will, but Dad dropped his guns and showed his bank statement that he didn't have so much money. He said he would pay $10,000 monthly, but my lawyer argued that I need that money for my college tuition, and $10,000 monthly won't suffice. The attorney ordered that Dad would have to pay my tuition and other needs like accommodation and food up to a minimum value of $75,000. If my expenditure exceeded that, I'm on my own, and if my expenditure doesn't cover $75,000, Dad would have to pay the balance amount. I didn't quite like this idea of still being dependent on him for the money, but I was left with no choice. Dad actually didn't have $75,000 to give it to me at one shot. I resisted this middle ground, but Dad pleaded with me with teary eyes and promised he would not default, so I agreed. But I told him that in case he or Mom creates any fuss about it in the future, I'm going to sue them again, and this time I'm going to demand compensation for the mental torture. He agreed. Meanwhile, Mom and Mandy went behind me. Mandy has been telling everyone that I have given hypertension to my parents and brought shame to the house by dragging the family to court. Well, this is the irony. There ain't any shame and disgrace when she got knocked up, but I brought shame by just asking them for my own money. Wow, you know what? I don't give a damn about it anymore. They labeled me a black sheep, and now I guess I'm happy being one. Update 4. Hey peeps, I know I took a long time to update. I was busy settling into a new life in college. I graduated with top grades from high school. I sent the convocation invites to my parents, knowing they would not turn up. Surprisingly, Dad showed up. He seemed happy, and for the first time he said he was proud of me. It took him 18 years and a court case to realize that I was also his daughter and I, too, needed love and care. Doesn't matter now. I have moved past it. I quit my job at the cafe and moved to my college dorm. The money I get from Dad covers for college tuition fees, accommodation, and food. Beyond that, I'm on my own. I took up a part-time job near the college campus. I'm also giving math lessons to my classmates for some extra bucks. I'm good at math, quite a flex, right? Dad has been sending the money quite diligently as ordered by the court. Some of you asked about my equation with Dad and where he was all this while when Mom was mean to me, so here it is. Dad was non-existent to me. Dad saw everything wrong which was happening to me, but he chose to look the other way. He ignored my problems and never questioned Mom for her behavior. He obliged whatever Mom said. In fact, he considered that Mom made good decisions to use my sister's clothes for me because, apparently, Mom was saving his money throughout my childhood. I have seen Dad struggling financially, so any opportunity to save a penny, he's game for it. So in that way, if you see, he always supported Mom. I'm also not sure how he reacted to Mandy's unexpected pregnancy. Whatever little I know is through cousins and relatives. Mandy's wedding was done so hush-hush that no one knew when it happened, Not even me. Like I said, I was living with Grandpa at that time, and I couldn't care less what was happening at my house. If I have to update about my current situation, I couldn't be happier. I'm living my dream life of attending college and securing good grades. My relationship with my dad has gotten better after the court ordeal. Mom and Mandy did their thing of bitching about me and badmouthing me, showing me as the bad guy, but sooner they got their own to handle. Mandy got into trouble with the cops. The money they had lent to Mandy got swept away. Mandy had opened a secret gambling business under the cover of a gaming zone. My parents didn't know about it. They thought it was actually a gaming parlor, but the cops nabbed her down and seized everything. All the machines and equipment were seized. Whatever little money she had in her bank account, my parents used it to bail her out, so in the end, she's left with nothing. This is what she had done with my grandpa's hard-earned money. I couldn't feel more satisfied, to be honest. Deep down, I didn't have a good feeling about pushing Dad to the corner to get my money. Now I feel glad I fought back because Mandy didn't use that money for good reason. She opened a home-wrecking gambling business. After that encounter with cops and prison time, Dad threw her out of the house. Mom tried to advocate on her behalf, but Dad laid a choice to Mom. It's either Mandy or Dad. Mom doesn't work, so obviously she chose Dad and asked Mandy to get a job and move out. Mandy has been using her child to emotionally manipulate Dad to let her live in the house, and she had been successful until that gambling thing came out. But now I heard that Dad is no longer buying her BS and has kicked her out. She's living with her friend, but God knows how long that would last. She has not contacted me for help. How could she, after all the torture she and Mom had done to me? She better stay away from me. I won't shy away from humiliating her further. Today, before writing this update, I was reading my initial post, and it made me tear up. I was in such a bad situation back then. I had just lost my support system, my grandpa. My parents ripped me off my grandpa's inheritance. I was trapped in my own house by my narcissistic parents, and I was denied a college education. There was so much uncertainty about my future. All I could see was darkness and helplessness. But a huge thanks to this community for all the support. I still miss my grandpa. It's because of him that I'm in college today. He's my guardian angel. I know he's blessing me from wherever he is now. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My daughter abandoned me when I was battling cancer. 2 years later, she showed up, thinking I was dying, expecting to inherit everything I have. I, a 56-year-old man, was diagnosed with colon cancer 7 months ago. It was detected during a routine checkup, and thankfully it was just at the initial stage. No matter how positive the doctors were, I was devastated. No one is happy dying. I came home and informed my daughter about it. She was traumatized just like me. I have no one in my life except for my daughter, and likewise, for her, she has no one but me. Her mother is alive but non-existent for both of us. I'm a single man living with my 22-year-old daughter, Hannah. My wife and I separated amicably 14 years ago. We fell out of love, and she moved to Atlanta with her boyfriend. I was left with the custody of my daughter, who was 8 back then. Hannah has been a difficult child. Our separation didn't go down well with her. She became resentful of her mother because she left her. She never spoke to her mother after that. She never took her call. I tried my best to fill that gap and raise her well, but I guess I faltered here. When I told Hannah about my cancer, her first reaction was pain and hurt. We cried and hugged and told each other how much we love each other. We talked about our happy times together. Her school's graduation day, our yearly vacations, and hiking. She promised to support me and take care of me. I never thought she would get tired of me and abandon me, but here we are. After 7 months, she packs her bags and leaves me behind like a pile of garbage. I've been nothing but supportive to her for her whole life, and this is what I get in return. I do understand that it's tough for a young woman to take care of her ailing father. Well, she didn't have to clean I had a nurse taking care of those things. All I needed from my daughter was to be by my side. My doctor advised I should quit my job or shrink it down minimally because the treatment would take a lot out of me mentally and physically. I informed my manager about it. He was empathetic to my situation and released me. He said I can rejoin after fighting the deadly guest. I quit my job to focus full-time on my healing. Finance isn't a problem for me. I don't have any major responsibilities. I have paid off my house mortgage long ago. My daughter's education is done. How much she pursued. I have enough substantial savings to last for a few years. Then I have some assets that I can liquidate in case the cash dries out, so I'm in a good position to handle it financially. I was also quite positive about the treatment. My doctors were supportive. Hannah used to take me for chemo and regular checkups. Chemo sessions were so painful and draining. I barely was able to move for a day or two after each session. I needed Hannah's help with the basic stuff like getting me food and meds. I got myself a wheelchair so that I could move around the house on my own during those weekdays. Yet, on some days, getting into the wheelchair also felt like a task. The treatment was wearing me down mentally as well as physically. I felt so weak that I felt my bones were about to blow out. It made me even more frustrated that I was struggling to do basic tasks like eating, walking, or using a... As the months went by, Hannah got cranky. She never stopped by my room. She stopped talking to me properly. Our conversations boiled down to one-word responses from her. It was painful for me to see my daughter ignoring me. I have no one in life but her. Talking to her made me forget most of my pain, but when she turned hostile, nothing could be worse for me. I confronted her. I asked her if she considered me to be a burden. She burst out and says, "Yes, nothing could be more heartbreaking than this." She said she was sick of taking care of me. I understand that making timely meals for me and taking care of my basic stuff could be overwhelming for a young person, and young people don't like to be around sick people, so I told her I would be hiring a nurse to take care of me. I asked the hospital to provide a house nurse for me, and they allotted a nurse who was experienced in taking care of cancer patients. I thought I had cracked a solution for my problem, but no. Hannah was still cranky. She continued her cold behavior. Not only did she maintain distance from me, but she was also mean to the nurse. I asked the nurse to stay out of my daughter's way, but Hannah picked on the nurse over trivial things. She even asked the nurse not to touch the refrigerator or even enter the kitchen because, apparently, she was dirty from cleaning the patient's stool. Though Hannah never said anything to her face. After a while, it became evident to the nurse that Hannah didn't like her presence. The nurse asked me if I was satisfied with her work because it seemed Hannah was not. I affirmed that she was performing her duties very well and I have no complaints. That day, when the nurse left in the evening, I confronted Hannah about her behavior. Previously also, I had asked Hannah to stay out of my business and let the nurse do her work peacefully. But now the water has breached its limit and my nurse was feeling the brunt. I had to intervene before she quit her job. When I mentioned to Hannah that she was mean to the nurse, she flipped out. She said I was unnecessarily blowing it out of proportion. She said the nurse stinks. I was trying to teach her some basic hygiene etiquette, and that rant ended with tears. I lost my cool and yelled at her, "God damn it. She's a nurse. She has been taught and trained about hygiene. She knows it more than you do. What the hell do you think you are to give her hygiene lessons? School dropout." That's right. She screamed and ranted for a good 10 minutes about how I had made her life miserable. She held me responsible for why her mother abandoned her and why she couldn't have a normal childhood like others. This didn't hurt me much. I'm used to this kind of outburst from her. She had done this so many times. What was hurtful was her false allegations. She said that the nurse is a piece of crap who eats, looks, and smells like, "I know why you're protecting that. Has she made you her sugar daddy?" She went on to say that the nurse must have realized that I was a soft target to manipulate and get my wealth because I have no family to inherit my property. I cut her off in between like, "What the hell? What kind of delusional being are you?" Our argument got so worse that she stormed out the door and left. After an hour, I hear her yelling again from the living room, and she's dragging her packed suitcases out of the house. She shouts, "I'm leaving the house for your good. This is what you wanted. Now you can do whatever you want with your mistress. Shower your every penny on that before you die. I don't care. Don't expect me to visit you when you're dying." I'm not going to come. I wanted to stop her, but her words broke my soul. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I just sat near the window sobbing and seeing her stuffing her suitcases in the car and driving off. It's been weeks now since she has left. I feel worthless. I have failed as a father. Her words hurt me more than my illness. How could she allege that I was having a relationship with my nurse? How could she even think I would be wasting myself on the nurse? I feel like a failure. Failed at everything. Failed as a husband. Failed as a father that I feel no motivation to continue my treatment. Edit 1. Thanks for all the love and support. The post blew up unexpectedly. I was looking at this space as a sort of therapy to get rid of my miserable and lonely life. Everyone engaging in my post is very precious to me. Even the slightest ounce of love means a lot to me. So thanks to all. I would like to add a brief background about Hannah. One good guy asked me here, why is my 22-year-old daughter living with me, and did I take her for therapy in her early days? Dude, yes, I did everything to bring her emotions in check. Counseling, spending time with her, taking her out. In fact, I never got serious with any woman to avoid any turmoil in Hannah's life. Hannah didn't take our separation well. She got aggressive. I took her to therapy and it helped her to an extent, but her aggression often relapsed. She dropped out of college. I tried hard to convince her to continue, but she didn't. She said she wanted to do something of her own, start a salon. I funded her spa salon. There she met a guy whom she claimed to be the love of her life. She wanted to marry him after dating for less than a year. She was barely 19 then. I advised her to spend more time before making any move. But yeah, as usual, she did what she wanted. Her marriage didn't last even a year. She shifted back with me. The guy she married was a loser. He had no job. He lived on her salon income, and when they ate up all the investment off the salon, they had to sell it. He left her shortly after that. She didn't get any alimony whatsoever. The guy was broke, so ultimately she was left with no income and no husband. I had to have her back. She has been living with me on my income. Now, when I'm dying, who knows? She abandoned me like a pile of garbage. Update 1. Hey friends, I know I took months to update. Thanks for checking on me. Just so happy to connect with so many of you on DM. Never thought that this space would give me some genuine friends. This month I had my last chemo session. I've been declared cancer-free. I can't thank the medical facilities enough for the impeccable treatment they have provided. After that clash with my daughter, things got so worse that my recovery halted, if not deteriorated. My doctor got concerned and recommended I seek a counselor to help me cope with the distress. It helped. It really did. The first session with the counselor was nothing but me bawling my lungs out. It was such a relief talking to someone after a long time. I even told her that I don't want to continue my treatment and let myself succumb to the disease. But the counselor helped me cope with my depression and hopelessness. I was even asked to have a full-time nurse because I was living alone and was growing weak. Should any emergency occur at odd hours, I should have someone to take care of me. I offered double pay to my existing caregiver to accommodate me full-time because she knew my medical history and my diagnosis, so I didn't want to replace her. Had Hannah been here, she would have picked on me for having the nurse full-time. It disgusts me to think how she accused me of something which I could have never thought about. Anyway, I have moved past my daughter. If she can abandon me at my lowest, I shouldn't be thinking about her either. With the support from my doctors, counselor, and nurse, I focused on my healing. My nurse used to take me for chemo, and I realized that more than physical, I used to get mentally drained. Earlier, when Hannah used to accompany me, she was constantly throwing tantrums at me, which worried me more than the physical exhaustion I was going through. In the process of my treatment, I lost my hair, lost my weight, but I was still positive and determined to overcome it. Guilty of saying this, but I think Hannah moving out proved a positive thing for me. With time, I felt the negativity moving out of my life. I couldn't feel more relieved. I was holding on to her until now, made her my sole purpose in life, gave up my happiness for hers, but by moving out, she taught me a lesson, a bitter lesson that I shouldn't have overdone my duties. My love, my care, I shouldn't have let her exploit me and walk over me. She made me a punching bag, and I just stood there and took it. Not anymore. Ah, such a relief. I'm looking forward to rebuilding my life. Earlier, I thought of going back to work, but now I think I don't need to. I have decent savings to make ends meet. If at all I see myself running out of money, I'll take up some basic job at a supermarket or so. But right now I'm focusing on getting my weight back and strengthening my muscles. Started with walks and would soon jog and run after the breathlessness subsides. It's not easy. I still drain out after doing the basic chores, but I'm taking it one at a time. My nurse is still here, but I would be letting her go once I regain some strength to be able to take care of myself. Update 2. It's been 2 years since I was declared cancer-free. These 2 years I spent doing what I really enjoyed. Realized I never enjoyed my life. Worked hard all my life to give a good lifestyle to my daughter. On my time off from work, I spent it on my daughter to fill her mother's gap, to avoid getting into any serious relationship. I ghosted a lot of women, and then went into guilt trips, avoiding them. Eventually, I stopped dating at all. I did all these to protect my daughter. It all seemed futile after she had grown up, and I had time by myself. I didn't utilize that, TBH. I was still worried that it wouldn't go well with Hannah. She had always lived with me except for the 10 months of her marriage, and I knew she couldn't stand the presence of another woman in the house. After going cancer-free, I started dating. Initially very awkward. Funny part, I realized the syllabus of the dating game has changed a lot. Gosh, today's women use such lingo and jargon. I had to use Google Dictionary in the middle of conversations, lol. After meeting about half a dozen women through this dating app, I found someone with whom I could vibe. No, I didn't have sex with 6 women. Just went out for dinner and coffee. This woman, calling her Syra, she's in her early 50s. She got cheated by her husband several times. She gave him many chances to mend his ways for the sake of her daughter, but he didn't. She eventually moved out and raised her daughter as a single mom. Now that her daughter has moved out for college, she's trying her luck. Also, it was her daughter who insisted she seek a partner. Hearing her go gaga about her daughter, I sometimes feel jealous. Not in a bad way. I mean, what did I do wrong that my daughter never reciprocated my love? Anyway, after seeing her for 6 to 7 months, we decided to move in together. Did we take it too fast? I don't think so. I'm able to hit 60. Don't think I have more than a couple of decades before I'm laid inside a coffin, lol. We had an option that she could move in with me, but Syra was more inclined that I move in with her. She has artistic taste and has aesthetically designed every bit of her house on her own. Who wants to leave her craft for a house which has been on the verge of falling apart? I wasn't able to have proper maintenance of the house. Forget about the aesthetics. Also, I don't have very fond memories of the house which I would want to hold on to. I needed a change of scenery too, so I sold out my house. Haha. Yes, I sold it. More cash money for me to retire lavishly. Why would I not? Why should I leave it for Hannah who left me alone to die? But all this happened months ago. Why am I updating now? Because last week I saw a ghost. Rather, my daughter met a ghost. I was chilling with Syra when I got a call from Andy, the new owner of my house. He was furious. He said that a woman had trespassed on their house and created a chaos. She even got into a scuffle with Andy's girlfriend. As per Andy's information, a young woman sneaked into the house premises and tried to enter the house. Apparently, she had a house key, but it didn't work. When she was unable to unlock the house, she started banging the door profusely. Andy's girlfriend opened the door, yelling at that woman for hammering on the door. In return, the woman also abused Andy's girlfriend, calling her a who let a dying man F her to get the house. Andy's girlfriend got confused and said there was some misunderstanding, but the woman didn't listen and yelled at the top of her voice, calling her names and asking her to vacate the house as it belonged to her dad who died 2 years ago. Andy's girlfriend clarified that Andy had bought the house and no one had given her the house. She didn't know my name as they were not dating when Andy bought the house from me. Andy wasn't home to clarify the matter. His girlfriend called him in panic, but by then the woman had left, threatening to come back with her friends the next day. The way Andy described the woman, I knew she was Hannah. Andy asked me if I knew the woman. I meekly said she was my daughter, knowing that he would get mad at me, and he did. He freaked out. He asked me to come over the next day and sort out the matter, else he would call the cops on her. I told him to call the cops and get the restraining order, but later I realized that this was my mess, and it was my responsibility to deal with her and not let them suffer. I showed up the next day and waited for her. She arrived with 2 of her rookie friends. She yelled from the front porch and broke the flower pots kept on the porch. He opened the door with a baseball bat to scare them. I asked him not to, but he's a baseball coach. How could I stop him from showing off his skills? He stepped out, and before Hannah and her friends could charge at him, I stepped out. Hannah froze, her friends also stopped, seeing her getting numb. She muttered with a blank expression, "You're alive? I thought you were dead. What happened to your cancer?" That was an unmissable expression. I would have given that house for free to someone to see that murky expression on Hannah's face. Turned pale. She pointed towards Andy and his girlfriend and asked who they were. I said they were the owners of the house. I have sold it to them. She had the audacity to ask, "What did you do with that money? Ain't you going to die, though?" It was a hurtful statement, but it didn't hurt me anymore. Instead, I cracked up in her face. "I don't need to tell you, but here you go. That money, I'm going to use for the rest of my life. That's right, I'm cancer-free now. Before you ask anything, let me tell you, you get nothing from me. I have left my job. Whatever money I have, I'm going to spend it on myself until the last penny. You're on your own. Think that your dad is dead, like you have been thinking until now." She was in tears. She told her friends to leave, saying it was now the matter between Dad and her. Meanwhile, I told Andy that I would be leaving, and in case anyone creates any further ruckus, he should call the cops and get the restraining order against her. Saying that, I left. Hannah ran behind me, pleading, "Dad, don't do this to me. I'm your daughter, your only family. You can't abandon me like this." I smirked and said, "Sure, I can abandon you the same way you did." I sat inside my car and drove off. Usually, in this kind of situation, I feel remorseful and sad. But that day I felt lighter, satisfied, and somewhat happy. I think I did the right thing. Should have taught her the lesson long back. Thanks for putting up with me. I appreciate all the comments and well wishes I get on this thread. Hope no one goes through the turmoil I went through. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Ex-wife cheated on me with Mr. Romantic. Now she's broke, drowning in debt from the lavish dream wedding I never gave her, and has the nerve to ask me for money. I, 49M, met my wife, 49F, when we were in our mid-20s. We were friends for a while before we decided to date. The 2 of us dated for around a year, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, but at the time it seemed like we had been dating long enough. She mentioned us getting married, and I said I wanted to wait a little longer. Within a few months, I finally was ready to propose to my then-girlfriend. She accepted, and the 2 of us started planning a wedding. It was around this point I should have recognized the red flags, but I didn't. Why? Well, I was in love. See, my fiancé wanted a huge wedding. While I understand it was a special experience, I didn't see the point of spending a couple grand on what was essentially one day. I ended up convincing her to have a small, intimate ceremony. She seemed all right with it at the time, but I think as the months and years went by, she almost started to resent me for talking her into that. The thing is, we couldn't have afforded such a wedding at the time. I suggested that one day we could have the wedding of her dreams. One day if we decided to renew our vows. This seemed to please her, but again, I felt like this resentment was always there, just lingering beneath the surface. Was I the most romantic guy in the world? No, but I tried hard to keep the romance alive by doing little things for her over the years. And it wasn't like my wife didn't know this. When we got married, we also didn't have kids, so there wasn't that pressure hanging over us. The years passed, and by the time we were in our 40s, we had been married for almost 2 decades. Things had gotten stale for the past year or so, which led me to plan a romantic night out. I even asked my sister for help because, like I said, I wasn't very romantic. It ended up not going anywhere. My wife never came home that night, and when she did, she said that she had stayed at a friend's house. They had been drinking, so she figured it was safer for her to just spend the night there. I saw no reason to not believe her, so I took her at her word. The next night I tried again, and we had a pleasant dinner. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she brushed me off, saying she was too tired. Again, I didn't think too much of it. We both worked a lot, which was why we were finally able to afford the lifestyle we were currently living. This trend continued, and it got to the point where I had to ask myself if I was going to continue to believe her stupid lies, which were lies. I reached out to her friends to see if she was there, but they covered for her. I shouldn't have been surprised. The only way I could think was to directly confront her about her lies and ask her if she was cheating. To my surprise, she admitted everything. The night I confronted her, I think I was in shock that she just straight up told me that she was cheating. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I thought she might try to deny it and tell me that I was wrong. But she didn't do any of that. So I asked who it was and how long it had been going on. He was a family member of one of her friends. She met him one day. It was an instant attraction, and he was so romantic. There it was, the one thing that I could never manage to do. I did try, but my wife didn't think that I was trying hard enough. This guy was everything I wasn't and more, she claimed. Our marriage ended that night, and what began was the divorce process. It wasn't a bitter divorce. We agreed to split everything down the middle. The house would be sold and we'd each take half. This seemed like the best option for us to get away from each other quickly. Once everything was final, I bought a condo with the money we split from the joint account. I still had a decent amount left over that I was going to keep for a nest egg. Eventually, the house sold and I put that money away as well. You never knew when you were going to need it. My ex ended up doing the exact opposite. She took her money and bought an even bigger house than the one we lived in with each other. Then I heard that she was planning a wedding. A very huge wedding. I might add, it was the wedding she had always wanted. I was having flashbacks to the wedding we had all those years ago. My ex had resented me for all these years because we never had the wedding she truly wanted. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I did look at the pictures on Facebook afterward, and my God, it was a huge affair. Everything looked so expensive. I can just imagine how much money she spent on the whole thing, including the dress. At that point, I knew I had to take a step back and stop obsessing over this woman who was my ex. I focused on spending time with my friends and family, which helped. I assumed my ex was spending time with her new app. Turns out, though, not everything was great. I learned that a year after they got married, they were in debt. My ex spent the divorce settlement on the expensive house and expensive wedding, making it so she had nothing left. Her job did bring in a decent amount of income, but my ex was the only one making good money in that household because the app was a bomb. She dared to reach out to me to see if I could lend her some money. My ex played on our past relationship and the memories we made over 2 decades, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that it wasn't my problem that she spent all of her divorce money on pointless crap. I hung up on her and proceeded to receive at least 3 more calls from her that night, along with 3 very nasty voicemails. After I listened to them, I just laughed and played them to my friends to show how far she had fallen. They all found them as funny as I did. My ex truly had no shame or was just that desperate. I don't know if she ever truly believed that I would give her the money or not. Even if she had reached out to me a few months prior, I still wouldn't have given it to her. At no point was I ever that desperate. I blocked her number that night because I didn't want to hear another word from her. We were done. She cheated and wanted to go be with her app, who was the new love of her life. If she had planned better, my ex would have money just like I still did. Most of my family and friends were happy to see her go. I wonder if they had ever liked her or just tried to get along with her for my sake. It didn't matter anymore, though, because my ex was a part of my past, and that was where she was going to stay. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I discovered that my wife cheated on me and left for a rich man, but now it turns out that he's been married. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship when I, a 34-year-old male, met my wife, a 35-year-old female. It hadn't been a traumatic breakup. The two of us were just growing apart and wanted different things out of life, so we decided it was better to break up. A few months after that breakup, I bumped into a woman who introduced herself as Katie. We just started talking in a coffee shop and hit it off. When we exchanged numbers, I did warn her that I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, which meant I wasn't ready for anything serious, or anything at all. She waited until I was ready, which was pretty amazing. For me, I thought that a woman willing to wait for me must have interested me, right? It ended up not being the case, but at the time it truly did seem like I found someone good for me. We took it slow, and within a year and a half, the two of us were moving in together. After another 6 months, I proposed and we were planning a wedding. The wedding went off without a hitch. The two of us were financially stable at the time of our wedding. I had a decent job and so did my wife. While we might not have been as rich as the 1%, the two of us could be considered middle class at the very least. Our relationship was also good. We had our ups and downs, but the two of us truly did seem to be creating a great life together. For the first 3 years, everything seemed great until my wife started working on a particular project at work that was difficult, or this was what I thought of at the time. She was working long hours and just spending a lot of time out of the house. I missed her, but I understood that she was busy at work. When I had an important project at work, she supported me. I kept asking when she would be finished, but my wife kept extending the deadline. This had been going on for nearly 6 months now. It made no sense why she would still be spending all these late nights at work. It got to the point where I couldn't deny that something wasn't right. So I went on to her work laptop that she had brought home from work. Her home laptop didn't have anything. I already checked. This meant the evidence had to be there. I didn't know what evidence I was looking for, but I knew there had to be something on her laptop that would explain to me what was going on. On her laptop, I found several emails from an email account I didn't even know she had. On this email were dozens of emails that were shared between this unknown man. They were all of a romantic or sexual nature, which only confirmed the truth that I was afraid to admit to myself. She was cheating on me. When she came back home from picking up dinner for us, I had the laptop out in the open with the emails right there, so she could see that I knew everything. My wife didn't say anything at first. She looked like she was in shock, so I took the chance to ask her who was the guy she was cheating with. My wife screamed, saying I had no right to go into her work laptop because that contained confidential information. I almost wanted to laugh because she had been the one to use her work laptop to talk with this guy, so I asked again. He was a former client of the office that she had continued speaking to even after the contract ended. One thing led to another, and they started sleeping together. I asked if she had feelings for him. She said yes. My wife said she was going to eventually tell me that she wanted a divorce so she could move on and be with this man. Once I did a little digging, I discovered this man was very rich. When I say rich, I mean filthy, stinking rich. She always loved the finer things in life, but it seemed like she wanted to work towards it. I couldn't understand the shift in her personality. Maybe it had always been there, and I was so blinded by my love for her that I just wasn't able to see it. Whatever the reason, I knew this marriage was over. My wife fought it for a bit, but I think she was only doing this because she felt like it was what she had to do. The divorce seemed to take a long time to come to fruition, but in reality, it was just a matter of months. She went one way and I went another. A divorce never was on my radar, yet here I was newly divorced and alone. My ex-wife already had someone in mind. She posted on social media that she was with a new man, and they were engaged to be married. The truth of it was that her so-called fiancé was already married. He told her he was a widower, but his wife wasn't dead. Rather, she was just in another country taking care of an ailing family member. When she returned, everything hit the fan, so to speak. My ex-wife's engagement was called off, but this was a moot point given that her app was already married. They couldn't get married anyway. After that, her social media posts seemed to become quite erratic. She was posting about how she had lost her soulmate, but what I think she was upset at losing was her wealthy app. It was all about the money. This guy was going to help her get to that lifestyle much faster. Meanwhile, after my divorce, I reconnected with a girl from the past whom I had originally cut things off with just before meeting Katie. The two of us were friends for a while before we realized that we were finally in a place where we could give this a second try. She knew about my divorce and was sympathetic. When word got back to my ex that I was back with this particular woman, she went ballistic and started blasting me all over social media. She spent so much time blasting me and her app over all her social media that her job started to become in jeopardy. From what I heard, my wife was put on probation at her place of work. They were a public company, so things she could post could be used against them in some way. I just chose to shut down my social media for the time being because reading her posts was doing nothing but causing stress for me. As far as I know, she has been moved to another department and isn't making as much money as she once was. This is all on my ex. If she had just been happy for what she had, then all of that could have been prevented. My current girlfriend and I are talking about marriage but are trying to take it very slow right now. The last thing I want to do is run into anything without being completely sure. Don't want to make the same mistake twice. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My wife confessed to cheating. I went on autopilot, numb. I got divorced. Lawyers blocked her and her friends. But now she wants to meet. I, 32M, have been married to my wife, Kate, 30F, for 4 years. Together for 9. Our relationship has been amazing, loving, and supportive. We have good communication. Hardly ever argue. And our bedroom life has gone from strength to strength over the years. We discussed cheating in the past, and I was always clear that we would be over if it ever happened. Kate went home to visit her family last weekend, which was fairly normal. Before she left on Friday night, we had a minor argument about keeping the house tidy. So our communication was limited on Saturday. But I knew she was going out to meet some friends at a bar. I trusted her 100%, so didn't think anything of it. Before I fell asleep, I texted her saying that I hope she had a nice night. When I woke up on Sunday morning, I had a missed call from Kate at 4 a.m., so I immediately called her to check if she was okay, but no answer. After a few hours, I tried again a few times, but still no answer. Around an hour later, I got a message saying she was fine and was driving back soon. Kate got home late afternoon and looked awful. She had clearly been crying, was not wearing any makeup, unusual for her, and looked like a shell of a person. I knew right away something was wrong, but she wouldn't let me hug her and would barely speak. I sat her down on the couch and made her some tea. I gently encouraged her to tell me what was wrong, and she burst into uncontrollable tears for at least 10 minutes while I was trying to comfort her. She then proceeded to tell me, stopping every few words, that she had slept with someone last night after the bar. At that moment, something in my brain broke. I can't describe it any other way. I immediately got up and jumped in my car and drove off. I went to a park and walked around it for about an hour. Kate was calling my phone constantly, and I turned it off. When I got home, I grabbed 2 suitcases from the garage and went to our bedroom. I threw some of Kate's clothes and shoes into them and left them by the front door. Kate was lying on the floor in the living room, curled up into a ball, sobbing. I called her best friend who lives nearby and told her that Kate needed a place to stay and a ride to her place, and that Kate could explain everything to her later. I told Kate I was leaving for an hour and that her friend was coming to pick her up. She grabbed onto my legs, trying to stop me from leaving. When I returned home again, Kate was gone, and so were the cases. On Monday, with a clearer head, I answered one of Kate's many calls and told her that I needed her to send me an email with as much detail as possible of that night. And if she leaves anything out, there will be no hope of reconciliation. I received this email on Monday night, but still haven't opened it since then. Everyone has been trying to contact me, but I have just been working, exercising, and sleeping. One of her friends turned up at my house with an attitude, demanding an explanation. I told her to speak to Kate and closed the door in her face. I have also been speaking to divorce lawyers, have moved money into separate accounts, and blocked Kate and all of her friends on everything. Everything I have done since I found out seems like I've been on autopilot. I don't feel angry, upset, or overly emotional. Just numb. Kate posted a note through the door yesterday asking me to meet tomorrow, but I'm conflicted. Should I meet her? Will it change anything? Is there any point in trying to reconcile? Is it normal to feel like a robot, and how do I snap out of this? Edit. Just to add that when I came home the first time, Kate confirmed it was consensual. She was drunk but knew what she was doing. Update 1. After reading your comments, I decided to meet with Kate, but not read the email. Kate came to the house yesterday, and when I opened the door, she looked terrible. She tried to hug me and started mumbling apologies, but I stopped her, and we sat down to talk. I started by telling Kate that I would be recording the audio of the conversation, and she agreed. I then asked her to explain what happened and told her that I haven't read the email she sent. Kate said she had been at the bar with 2 friends I know and like, both of them, and told me what she had to drink. I was surprised at how little she drank because it was the same amount we would normally drink when going for dinner. A few glasses of wine and a cocktail. She admitted she was only slightly tipsy. One of her friends, Sarah, has a younger brother, Max, 27M, who came to pick them up around midnight. It's a running joke in their group that Max has had a major crush on Kate since high school, and I had heard them joke about this. The four of them went to get some food, and Max then dropped each one off until it was just him and Kate. Kate said she didn't want him to drive the 20 minutes to her parents' place after working all day, so would just order an Uber from his apartment. She went into his apartment to order the Uber but couldn't get one. Max suggested she should crash in his bed, and he would take the sofa. He would drop her off in the morning. Kate refused and continued to try to find an Uber. They were sitting on Max's bed, and he kissed her. She kissed him back, and they ended up having sex. After that, she broke down crying from guilt, and Max took her home. She cried for another hour, then tried to call me to tell me what she had done. We had to stop a number of times because Kate kept breaking down and crying hysterically. She told me it was a huge mistake. She got caught up in the moment. It was terrible. She only loves me, blah blah blah. After she was done, I told her that her story didn't make sense, but it didn't matter at this stage because I was done. This caused another breakdown. I told her I was going to continue with the divorce preparations, but for the next month we would be separated with no contact. I also told her that we would both remain faithful, would get a full STD panel, and she would tell our mutual friends and family what happened. If she sticks to these conditions, I would be willing to meet again to see if there was any way forward other than divorce. She enthusiastically agreed to this but made it clear that she did not expect me to stay faithful to her. I know many of you will criticize this decision, but I need to be sure that divorce is the right option after I have had time to process everything that has happened. I am still 99% sure that is where we are heading, but I need to be 100% certain. Update 2. First of all, I'm not in robot mode anymore. I have been having bursts of intense feelings of anger and betrayal, but I've been keeping busy with work and exercise. My friends have also been great since they found out and have been dragging me out of the house to hang out. I decided to read the email and wish I hadn't. The story Kate told in the email was mostly the same, but there was no mention of going into Max's apartment to order an Uber. There were also pretty explicit details of what they did, for how long, and that they had apparently used a condom. I will never be able to forget this description. Many people who were originally criticizing me for kicking Kate out of the house have now apologized. But they can keep it. Kate's parents reached out to apologize, and I spoke to them because we had a good relationship before all of this. They begged me to try to work it out but said they understood if I decided to get divorced. I didn't commit to either option. Kate's other friend that was there that night contacted me to tell me her side of the story. It mostly matched up. Bar, food, home. She said Kate could stay over at her house, but she refused, saying she was driving home early the next morning. Max apparently insisted that he would take Kate home. The version of the story that she told didn't mention Kate trying to get an Uber, only that Max invited her in, and she accepted. I asked her if she had ever suspected anything before, and she told me that about a year ago she went to meet Kate for coffee but found Max sitting with her when she arrived. Apparently, Kate looked guilty, but when asked about it, she said they just met by chance. Sarah, Max's sister, also reached out to me, and I spoke to her too. She was angry with both Max and Kate and told me a similar story. Apparently, her whole family are angry with Max, and she had not spoken to Kate since she found out. She apologized on behalf of her idiot brother and said she had warned him to stay away from Kate since high school. She didn't think anything else had happened between them. I have had zero contact from Kate, but heard that she was going to be moving into an Airbnb near our house. Apparently, she is not coping well and called in sick from work a few times over the last few weeks. She does have support from the friend she is currently living with, and I asked her parents to keep an eye on her. Her parents came up to see her this past weekend. I went out with some friends at the weekend and ended up drunk at a bar. I was talking to a girl there who I probably could have gone home with, but I stopped myself because I wanted to keep my self-respect. Reading the email and hearing what they had done made me give up hope of repairing this, especially when I know she is not being truthful with me on other things, so who knows. I will be moving ahead with the divorce and might not even wait a month before telling Kate that this is my final decision. Update 3. I debated posting this update, but a lot of people seem to be invested in this mess, so here it is. Apologies in advance if this is TMI. Kate sent me an email last week asking to pick up some things she needed for work. My lawyer told me not to prevent her from having access to the house or her possessions, so I reluctantly agreed that she could come over on Thursday night when I would be at the gym. I told her to be out by 7:30, but when I got home at 8 o'clock, she was still there. When I walked in, she had left a few work-related items next to the stairs, and she was chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked amazing, with her hair and makeup done, wearing one of the dresses I like. The whole place had been tidied and cleaned. I calmly asked her to leave immediately, and she made her way to the door but stopped and asked if we could speak. I should have said no, but I eventually agreed. We sat down and had a conversation for around an hour, which jumped from topic to topic. Again, I told her I would record the audio, and she agreed. I started by asking her if she had kept her side of the agreement we made the last time we spoke. She said she had taken an STI test, which was all negative, mine was too, thankfully, and a pregnancy test, which was negative. She hadn't been with anyone else and also told a few friends and family what happened, and many of them were angry and were not speaking to her. I asked a lot of questions that had been turning over in my mind for the last few weeks. She confirmed that her reason for going into Max's apartment, the Uber story, was BS, and she said he invited her in for a drink, and she agreed, knowing at some level that something was going to happen. She can't explain why she did this other than being selfish and enjoying the attention. She also confirmed that she had texted with Max a few times over the years because he would shower her with compliments and make her feel good. He would always initiate, and she was apparently careful not to lead him on and said she had never sent him explicit messages or pictures. Kate also told me that they had hooked up about 6 months before we got together but never had sex. She admitted that she was always a bit curious. Her story about being caught at the coffee shop was that Max had texted her asking what she was up to, and she had told him where she was. He then turned up. She swore this was the first time they had ever done anything since we had been together. She said there was nothing missing in our relationship, and she hates herself for ruining her perfect marriage and causing me so much pain. I told her that I still don't believe her story, and that there was no point in continuing the conversation. She calmly asked what she would need to do to make this right, offering up her phone, location sharing, not going out without me, etc. She had clearly been doing some research. I said that I had no plans to become her prison guard, especially when I would never get over the betrayal. Things then took an unexpected turn, which caught me completely off guard. She asked me to turn off the audio recording because she had something private she wanted to discuss and didn't want other people hearing it. I refused, and she reluctantly continued. She asked if I had been involved with anyone else sexually since all of this happened, making it clear she was fine with it. I told her no, and she said that I must be going crazy. We used to have sex almost daily and started talking dirty about all of the things I could do with and to her. This involved a lot of kinky things that I had wanted to try or had only done a few times. She said she wanted to meet my needs, even if we did not get back together. She said we could have as many threesomes as I wanted from now on, or we could be open on my side only, and she would even find partners for me. She was trying very hard to turn me on, and I stayed silent until she asked who I wanted to have a threesome with. For some reason, I mentioned the name of her coworker who was 5 years younger than Kate, in a total knockout. This surprised her, but she was in too deep and asked me what I wanted to do with her. I went into detail about a pretty hardcore scenario, and Kate was encouraging me until I said that she would just be watching. This again caught her off guard, but she went along with it. Later on, I realized that I only said all of this as a petty attempt to hurt Kate, which I don't feel good about. She was obviously convinced that her plan was working, so she pulled up her dress and got into my favorite position on the couch, begging me to have sex with her. I'll admit that for a few seconds my body reacted, even though my head was not in the game. Everything suddenly came into focus, and the content of her email came flooding into my head. I can't explain why, but I started to laugh. Not just a chuckle, but a full-on belly laugh. She looked hurt and moved away, then started to cry. I told her it was time for her to go, and she left quickly, probably due to the embarrassment. I also said she needed to hurry up and get a lawyer because we are getting divorced. The post-nut clarity after she left confirmed that I had dodged a bullet. I have a meeting with my lawyer later this week and want to move forward with the divorce as quickly as possible. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My father decided to marry a young woman a month after my mom's death and threatened to kick me out of the inheritance if I didn't attend the wedding. Little did he know what was coming to him. I, 28F, lost my mom to cancer a week ago. The pain is still raw, like an open wound that won't stop bleeding. But what's made this unbearable time even worse is how my dad, 54M, has been acting. To understand the full picture, I need to give some background on my family. My parents' relationship was always rocky, to put it mildly. When they first got together in their early 20s, my dad took my mom to meet his parents. It didn't go well. His family was wealthy and status conscious, while my mom came from a humble background. They rejected her outright, accusing her of being a gold digger who was only after my dad's money. My dad was furious. In a rare show of backbone, he stood up for my mom and cut ties with his family. They moved to a different state to start fresh. From that day forward, he never talked about his family again. He prohibited my mom from trying to contact them or even mentioning them. As a result, I grew up knowing nothing about that entire side of my family tree. The only family I knew growing up was my mom's grandfather. He had raised her since she was orphaned as a young child. He was a kind, gentle man who doted on me, but he passed away a few years ago, leaving my mom as my only real family connection. My childhood memories are dominated by the sound of shouting. My parents fought constantly, their arguments echoing through our house at all hours. My dad would yell horrible things at my mom, calling her stupid, worthless, ugly. He'd accuse her of trapping him, of ruining his life. Sometimes the fights would turn physical. I'd hear crashes and thuds, then my mom's sobs. I spent many nights huddled in my room, pillow over my ears, trying to block it all out. In the mornings, I'd creep out to find things broken. My mom with puffy eyes and sometimes bruises she'd try to hide with makeup. My dad would act like nothing happened, reading the paper and ignoring us both. It was clear from early on that my dad hated being a father. He'd complain loudly about how I'd ruined their lives, how he never wanted kids. Most of the time, he just ignored my existence entirely. The only times he acknowledged me were to criticize. My grades weren't good enough, I was too loud, too messy, too needy. Nothing I did was ever right in his eyes. My mom did her best to shield me from the worst of his abuse and give me some impression of a normal childhood. She was my rock, always there with a hug and words of encouragement when my dad tore me down. She'd take me to the park or for ice cream after bad fights, trying to create happy memories to balance out the dark ones. I guess my parents must have started out in love, but it faded quickly. By the time I was in elementary school, they were sleeping in separate rooms and barely speaking except to argue. I often wondered why my mom stayed. Years later, she confided that she stayed for my sake. She was afraid of what would happen to me if she left me alone with him. But I could see how miserable she was, trapped in a loveless marriage with a cruel man. As I got older, the dynamic shifted. My dad's abuse became more focused on me. As I entered my teens, he'd belittle my appearance, mock my interests, crush any dreams or ambitions I expressed. My mom would try to stand up for me, which only made him turn his anger back on her. It was a brutal cycle that seemed never-ending. I left for college as soon as I could, eager to escape the toxic environment of my childhood home, but I worried constantly about my mom, left alone with him. I'd call her often, and sometimes I could hear the tremor of held-back tears in her voice. When Mom was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, I hoped it might finally soften my dad's heart. Instead, he became even more cruel, if that was possible. He complained endlessly about the medical bills, about how inconvenient her illness was for him. He refused to take her to chemo appointments or help care for her in any way. I couldn't bear the thought of Mom going through this alone, so I moved back home to take care of her in her final months. My dad was rarely there, always working late or going out with friends. When he was home, he'd snap at Mom for being too slow or making a mess. He showed no compassion or tenderness, even as she withered away before our eyes. It broke my heart to see her suffer, not just from the cancer but from his coldness too. There were nights I'd sit by her bed, holding her hand as she cried, wondering how the man she married could be so heartless. I tried to fill the void, to give her all the love and care he wouldn't, but I knew it wasn't the same. When my mom passed away, the loss was indescribable. She was my best friend, my support system, the only person who truly loved me unconditionally. I feel like a part of me died with her. My dad, on the other hand, seemed almost relieved. He barely shed a tear at the funeral and spent most of the time on his phone. He rushed through the arrangements, opting for the cheapest options. It was like he couldn't wait to be done with the whole thing and move on with his life. Yesterday, just a month after Mom died, my world was shaken again. My dad brought home a young woman and introduced her as his girlfriend, Megan, 27F. He said they'd been dating for a year, which means he was seeing her while my mom was dying of cancer. I was shocked and furious. How could he betray Mom like that in her final months? Megan tried to hug me, saying she was so sorry for my loss, but her sickeningly sweet tone felt fake. There was a calculating look in her eyes that made me uneasy. She's barely older than me. How could she be interested in my dad for anything other than his money? Then my dad dropped another bombshell. He announced that he and Megan were getting married soon. He said I needed to accept her as my new stepmom or he'd cut me out of his will. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom's body is barely cold, and he's already replacing her. I told my dad I refused to play happy family with his mistress. He got angry, calling me selfish and immature. He said I was being unreasonable and that I should be happy he found love again. Megan started crying, saying she just wanted us all to get along, but it felt manipulative to me, like she was trying to make me look like the bad guy. I'm at a loss for what to do now. Part of me wants to tell my dad to shove his inheritance and cut contact with him for good. After a lifetime of his abuse and neglect, followed by this final betrayal of my mom's memory, I don't want anything to do with him. But I'm afraid of being left with nothing. Mom left me some money, but not enough to live on long term, and the house I grew up in is in my dad's name. Without my inheritance, I'd be struggling financially. Is it worth swallowing my pride and principles to secure my future? Megan keeps texting me, saying she wants to take me shopping and bond as mother and daughter. It makes my skin crawl. She's only a year younger than me. The idea of her being my stepmom is laughable. I get the strong feeling she's just after my dad's money and sees me as competition for the inheritance. I feel so alone without my mom. She was the only one who ever truly loved and supported me. Now I'm stuck living in this house with the father who never wanted me and his gold-digger girlfriend. Every time I see them together, laughing and cuddling on the couch where Mom used to sit, I want to scream. How can my dad act like Mom never existed? The house feels different now, spoiled by their presence. Megan has already started moving her things in, replacing Mom's belongings. She rearranged the living room furniture and bought new curtains. It's like she's trying to erase all traces of Mom. I hide in my room most of the time, unable to bear watching this woman take my mother's place. My dad is acting like a lovesick teenager. He's always fawning over Megan, buying her gifts, taking her on fancy dates. It's a side of him I've never seen before. He never treated my mom with a fraction of this affection. It hurts to see him being the loving partner to this stranger that he never was to my mother. I've tried talking to friends about the situation, but they don't really understand. They say things like, "At least your dad is happy," or "Maybe this Megan woman won't be so bad." They don't get how it feels to watch your father replace your mother so quickly and heartlessly. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting. Maybe I should give Megan a chance for the sake of peace. My dad says I'm being bratty and need to grow up. He claims that Mom would have wanted him to move on and be happy, but I can't shake the feeling that this is all wrong. How can I accept this woman as family when Mom's only been gone a month? I've been having trouble sleeping, plagued by nightmares where I see my mom crying, watching my dad with Megan. I wake up in cold sweats, feeling guilty like I failed her somehow by not fighting harder against the situation. The stress is taking a toll on my health. I've lost weight, and my hair is starting to fall out. I've thought about reaching out to my dad's estranged family. Maybe they could help me understand him better or offer some support, but I have no idea how to contact them or if they'd even want to hear from me after all these years, and my dad would be furious if he found out I tried. I feel trapped and conflicted. On one hand, I want to honor my mom's memory and stand up against what feels like a huge disrespect to her. I want to tell my dad and Megan exactly what I think of their relationship and refuse to be any part of it. On the other hand, I'm afraid of losing my only remaining family and financial security. As awful as my dad has been, he's still my father, and without my inheritance, I'd be struggling to make ends meet. Is it worth compromising my principles for financial stability? I don't know what the right thing to do is. Should I just fake it to keep my inheritance or stick to my principles and risk losing everything? I feel so lost and conflicted. The wound of losing my mom is still so fresh, and this situation is like salt being rubbed into it. Any advice or perspective would be appreciated. I'm desperate for some guidance on how to navigate this painful and complex situation. Update. As my dad's wedding to Megan approached, I grew increasingly desperate to find a way to stop it. I couldn't bear the thought of this woman, who was barely older than me, becoming my stepmom, especially so soon after losing my own mother. One evening, luck seemed to be on my side. My dad left his laptop open when he rushed out with Megan for some last-minute wedding shopping. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to snoop and hopefully find something to derail their plans. At first, I didn't find anything unusual, but then I noticed he had a second Facebook account. Curious. I clicked on it and was shocked by what I discovered. It was like looking at a stranger's profile. The photos showed my dad living a completely different life, one where my mom and I didn't exist. According to this account, my dad had never married. He claimed to be living in our state just for work. There were pictures of him with his parents and siblings at various events over the years, events I knew had happened during my childhood when he was supposedly estranged from his family. The more I dug, the more I uncovered. My dad had been maintaining two separate identities all this time. He even had another house in the city where he hosted his parents when they visited. All those business trips over the years suddenly made sense. He was living his other life. I felt sick to my stomach. My whole life had been a lie. My dad's family hadn't rejected my mom. They never even knew about her or me. We were my dad's dirty little secret that he'd been hiding for almost 30 years. I was shaking with anger and hurt, but I knew I had to act fast before my dad returned. I took pictures of everything I could find. The other profile, photos of the other house, anything that proved his deception. Then I found my grandfather's email address and sent him a message explaining who I was, along with pictures of me, my mom, and my dad's current life with Megan. For 2 agonizing weeks, I heard nothing back. I was starting to think my grandfather had dismissed my email as some kind of scam, but then one day, out of the blue, I got a phone call. It was my grandfather. He wanted to meet me in person. We arranged to meet at a cafe in town. I was a bundle of nerves as I waited for him. When an older man who looked strikingly like my dad walked in, I knew it was him. He approached me cautiously, studying my face. I could see the moment he recognized my dad's features in me. My grandfather sat down and told me he hadn't said anything to my dad about my email or this meeting. He wanted to hear the whole story from me first. So I told him everything. About my mom, my childhood, my dad's abuse, and now the situation with Megan. I could see the anger building in his eyes as I spoke. When I finished, my grandfather was quiet for a long moment. He admitted he was shocked and disappointed to learn about me and my mom, but given the circumstances, he wanted to help me. He said he would confront my dad and get to the bottom of this. A few days later, my grandfather called my dad for a meeting. I wasn't there, but my grandfather filled me in afterward. He told my dad that he knew about his secret family, me and my mom. My dad was completely blindsided. He had no defense prepared for this scenario. It came out that my dad had lied to his family all these years because he was afraid of losing his inheritance. His parents were wealthy and conservative. He thought if they knew he'd gotten a girl pregnant and married her against their wishes, they would cut him off. So he created this elaborate double life to keep his inheritance secure while still marrying my mom. My grandfather was furious. Not only had my dad lied for decades, but he deprived me of knowing my family, and now he was trying to marry this young woman just weeks after my mom died. My grandfather decided to do some digging into Megan's background. What he found confirmed my suspicions. Megan had a history of dating wealthy older men and then taking them for all they were worth in messy divorces. She had several lawsuits against her from ex-boyfriends claiming she'd stolen from them. It was clear she was just after my dad's money. My grandfather confronted my dad with this information too. My dad tried to defend Megan, but it was obvious he was just scrambling to salvage his plans. His carefully constructed house of lies was crumbling around him. In the end, my grandfather made a decision that changed everything. He told my dad that because of his years of deception and his heartless treatment of me and my mom, he was cutting my dad out of his will. Instead, he was going to leave my dad's share of the inheritance directly to me. I was stunned. I'd gone from being afraid of losing my inheritance to suddenly being promised far more than I'd ever expected. But more than the money, I was overwhelmed by my grandfather's acceptance. After a lifetime of rejection from my dad, here was a family member choosing to embrace me. My dad was livid when he found out. He stormed into my room, red-faced and yelling. He accused me of turning his family against him and ruining his life. But for the first time, I wasn't scared of him. I stood my ground and told him that he'd ruined his own life with his lies and cruelty. Megan broke off the engagement when she realized my dad was being cut off financially. She moved out of the house the very next day, not even bothering to say goodbye. My dad was left with nothing. No fiancé, no inheritance, and no more lies to hide behind. As for me, I'm still processing everything that's happened. My grandfather has been making an effort to get to know me. He's introduced me to my aunts, uncles, and cousins. It's strange and a bit overwhelming to suddenly have this big family after a lifetime of it just being me and my mom. I'm planning to move out of my dad's house soon. My grandfather offered to help me find an apartment. I'm looking forward to starting fresh, away from the painful memories in that house. I still miss my mom terribly. I wish she could have lived to see the truth come out and to meet her in-laws. But I like to think she'd be happy knowing that I'm finally free of my dad's abuse and that I found a family who wants me. It's going to take time to heal from everything that's happened. I'm looking into therapy to help me process my childhood trauma and these recent revelations. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. I know some people might judge me for exposing my dad's lies, but after a lifetime of his abuse and neglect, I don't feel guilty. He made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. I'm choosing to focus on building relationships with my new family and creating a better life for myself. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice on my original post. Your kindness helped give me the strength to stand up for myself and uncover the truth. I'm grateful for this community and the help you've given me during this difficult time. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My sister-in-law tried to take over our house when she found out I was pregnant. She ended up hurting her own mother and now faces a restraining order. I'm Samantha, 29F, and I've been married to Clyde, 31M, for 3 years now. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue 6 years ago, and it was like something out of a rom-com. He spilled his drink on me, I laughed it off, and we ended up talking for hours. We dated for 3 years before getting married, and those years were some of the happiest of my life. Clyde is everything I could have hoped for in a partner. Kind, supportive, and we share a deep understanding that I've never experienced with anyone else. We both work full-time jobs. I'm a graphic designer at a local advertising agency, and Clyde is a high school history teacher. Our evenings together are precious to us. We usually cook dinner together, experimenting with new recipes we find online, and then settle to watch our favorite shows. It's a simple routine, but it's ours, and I love it. When we first got married, we faced a dilemma about where to live. We had been renting a small apartment but wanted something more permanent. That's when Clyde suggested we move into his childhood home. His father, Robert, had passed away from cancer 5 years ago, and his mother, Eileen, 58F, was living alone in the large 2-story house. At first, I was hesitant. Moving in with in-laws can be tricky, and I worried about privacy and boundaries. But when Clyde explained the situation, it started to make sense. The house was big enough that we could have the entire upstairs to ourselves. while Eileen would live downstairs. It seemed like a win-win situation. We'd have our own space, Eileen would have company, and we'd be able to save money for our future. Eileen is a sweet woman who mostly keeps to herself. She's a retired librarian who spends most of her time reading or tending to her garden. When we first moved in, she made it clear that she respected our privacy and wouldn't interfere in our lives. She even joked about installing a bell at the bottom of the stairs so we'd know if she was coming up, though we assured her that wasn't necessary. For the first few months, everything was perfect. We settled into a comfortable routine. Clyde and I would leave for work early in the morning, often bumping into Eileen in the kitchen as she made her morning tea. We'd chat briefly before heading out. In the evenings, we'd sometimes all eat dinner together, sharing stories about our day. It felt like we were building a real family dynamic. But then Clyde's sister, Rachel, 33F, started causing problems. Rachel and Clyde had always been close growing up, despite their 2-year age gap. Clyde often told me stories about their childhood adventures and how Rachel had always been protective of him. I was looking forward to building a relationship with her when Clyde first introduced us, hoping for a sister I never had. However, from day one, Rachel was cold and dismissive towards me. At first, I thought maybe she was just shy or needed time to warm up to me. But as time went on, it became clear that Rachel simply didn't like me. She would make snide comments about my clothes or my job, always with a sweet smile that made it hard to call her out without seeming oversensitive. Rachel is married to Tom, 35M, and has 2 kids, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. They live about 20 minutes away in a nice suburban neighborhood. Despite having her own family, Rachel visits her mother almost daily. At first, I thought it was sweet how close she was to Eileen, but I soon realized that Rachel's visits were more about keeping tabs on us and trying to control what happens in the house. One day, about 6 months after we moved in, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. I was surprised to find Rachel in our part of the house going through our things. When I asked what she was doing, she claimed she was looking for an old family photo album. I knew this wasn't true because Clyde and I had already gone through all the old photos when we moved in, organizing them neatly in the living room bookshelf downstairs. This incident led to our first big confrontation. Rachel started criticizing how we kept our space, saying it was messy and that I clearly didn't know how to maintain a home. I was hurt and angry, but I tried to keep my cool. I simply told her that we both work full-time jobs and do our best to keep things tidy when we can. This seemed to set Rachel off. She started yelling about how I was lazy and didn't deserve to live in her family home. She even went as far as to say that Clyde would eventually see how worthless I was and kick me out. I was shocked and hurt by her words. I had always tried to be kind and respectful to Rachel, even when she was cold to me. To hear her say these things felt like a slap in the face. When I told Clyde about the incident that evening, he was furious. He couldn't believe his sister would behave that way. The next day, he confronted Rachel when she came to visit Eileen. Rachel tried to deny it, claiming I was exaggerating. But Clyde didn't believe her. He made it clear that if she couldn't respect me, she wasn't welcome in our part of the house. This only seemed to make Rachel more determined to cause problems. She started spreading rumors about me to other family members. She told their aunts and uncles that I was trying to drive a wedge between Clyde and his family, that I was changing him and turning him against them. It was frustrating and hurtful, especially because I had to always try to be respectful and kind to everyone in Clyde's family. Things came to a head during Thanksgiving last year. We were hosting dinner for both our families, and I had spent days preparing. I wanted everything to be perfect, hoping that a nice family gathering might help smooth things over with Rachel. I had even asked Eileen for some of their family recipes to include in the meal. On Thanksgiving Day, everything was going well until Rachel showed up with 3 of her friends in tow. We hadn't invited them, and there wasn't enough food for extra guests. When I politely explained this to Rachel, she exploded, accusing me of being selfish and unwelcoming. The argument that followed was intense. Rachel screamed that I was trying to take over the family and push her out. She even accused me of manipulating Eileen to turn against her. I was in tears and Clyde was livid. He ended up asking Rachel and her friends to leave, which only made her more furious. After that incident, Rachel started demanding that we sell the house and split the proceeds. She claimed it was unfair that we got to live there rent-free while she had to pay for her own home. We explained that we contributed to household expenses and helped take care of Eileen, but Rachel wouldn't listen. She seemed convinced that I was somehow taking advantage of the situation. The situation has become unbearable. Rachel continues to spread lies about me, and she's trying to turn Eileen against us. She's even started showing up at my workplace, causing scenes that have embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. Last week, my boss pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay at home, which was mortifying. Clyde and I have discussed moving out, but we don't want to leave Eileen alone, and we love this house. It's not just a house to us. It's filled with memories of Clyde's dad, and we've made our own memories here over the past few years. The thought of leaving because of Rachel's behavior feels like letting her win. I'm at a loss for what to do. I've tried everything to make peace with Rachel. I've invited her for coffee to try and talk things out, sent her thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts, and even offered to babysit her kids to try and build a relationship, but nothing seems to work. She seems determined to hate me no matter what I do. Clyde is incredibly supportive, but I can see how much this family conflict is wearing on him. He's torn between his love for me and his bond with his sister. I don't want to be the cause of a rift between them, but I also can't continue to live under this constant attack. Eileen has tried to stay neutral in all of this, which in some ways makes it worse. I understand she doesn't want to choose sides between her children, but her silence sometimes feels like tacit approval of Rachel's behavior. Clyde has suggested family therapy, but Rachel refuses to participate, claiming that I'm the one who needs help, not her. I love Clyde more than anything, and I want to make this work, but I'm starting to wonder if that's even possible with Rachel in the picture. Has anyone dealt with a similar situation with in-laws? How did you handle it? I'm looking for any advice on how to improve this situation without completely destroying my relationship with Clyde's family. I'm afraid that if something doesn't change soon, it's going to irreparably damage my marriage, and that's the last thing I want. Update 1. It's been about 2 months since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain perspective on the situation and gave me the courage to take action. After much discussion, Clyde and I decided to take a more proactive approach to dealing with Rachel. We realized that trying to appease her or ignore the problem wasn't working, and it was time to address the issues head-on. We started by sitting down with Eileen and having an honest conversation about everything that had been going on. To our surprise, Eileen was more aware of the situation than we thought. She admitted that Rachel had been complaining about me to her for months, but she didn't believe most of what Rachel said. Eileen confessed that she felt caught in the middle and didn't know how to handle the situation without upsetting either of her children. She also revealed something that shed new light on Rachel's behavior. Apparently, Rachel had always struggled with change and had a hard time when Clyde first left for college. Eileen suspected that Rachel's issues with me stemmed from a fear of losing her place in the family. This conversation with Eileen was a turning point. She suggested that we have a family meeting to clear the air. We were hesitant at first, worried that it might devolve into another shouting match, but we agreed it might be the best way to address everything openly. So last weekend, we invited Rachel and Tom over for dinner and a talk. The days leading up to the meeting were tense. I spent hours cleaning the house, wanting everything to be perfect so Rachel wouldn't have anything to criticize. Clyde was on edge, alternating between hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Eileen busied herself making Rachel's favorite dessert, hoping it might help smooth things over. When Rachel and Tom arrived, the atmosphere was thick with tension. We made awkward small talk over dinner, everyone avoiding the elephant in the room. Finally, after we finished eating, Clyde cleared his throat and suggested we move to the living room to talk. The conversation started tensely. Rachel immediately went on the defensive, accusing me of trying to steal her family. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of all the advice I'd received, and calmly explained how her behavior had been hurtful and unwarranted. I shared specific instances of her actions and how they made me feel, trying to keep my tone neutral and non-accusatory. Clyde backed me up, telling Rachel that her treatment of me was unacceptable. He reminded her of all the times I had tried to build a relationship with her, only to be rebuffed or insulted. It was hard for him, I could tell, but he stood firm in his support of me. To our surprise, Tom spoke up. He had always been quiet during family gatherings, and I realized I barely knew him, despite being in-laws for 3 years. He admitted that Rachel's obsession with her childhood home and her animosity towards me had been causing problems in their own marriage. He revealed that Rachel had been spending more time at Eileen's house than at their own home, neglecting their children in the process. Tom looked exhausted as he spoke, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. This revelation seemed to shock Rachel. She broke down in tears, confessing that she felt like she was losing her place in the family. She admitted to feeling jealous of my relationship with Clyde and threatened by my presence in her childhood home. Through her tears, she talked about how hard it had been to see changes in the house. The new paint colors we'd chosen, the rearranged furniture, the photos of Clyde and me on the walls. Each change felt like an eraser of her childhood memories. While I sympathized with her feelings, I made it clear that her behavior was not okay. We had a long, emotional discussion about boundaries, respect, and family dynamics. Rachel opened up about feeling left behind when Clyde went to college and how she had always imagined raising her kids in their childhood home. I shared my own fears of never being accepted by her and how her actions had made me feel unwelcome in what was supposed to be my home. 2. By the end of the night, Rachel had apologized for her actions, and we had agreed to try and start fresh. It wasn't a magical fix. Years of resentment don't disappear overnight, but it felt like a step in the right direction. We set some ground rules. Rachel would call before visiting and respect our privacy in our part of the house. We would have regular family dinners to stay connected in a positive way. Rachel would stop spreading rumors and negative comments about me to other family members. We would all make an effort to communicate openly and honestly about our feelings and concerns. Rachel agreed to consider seeing a therapist to work through her feelings about change and family dynamics. It's only been a week since this meeting, but I've already noticed a change. Rachel has been more respectful when she visits, calling ahead as agreed. She even invited Clyde and me over for dinner at her place, which was the first time. The dinner was a bit awkward, but it was nice to see Rachel making an effort. Eileen seems relieved that we're all trying to get along. She's been more relaxed and has even started talking about taking a vacation, something she hasn't done since Robert passed away. I think she feels less pressured to be the peacekeeper now that we're all communicating better. Clyde and I have had several long talks since the family meeting. He's expressed guilt over not realizing how deep Rachel's issues ran, for not standing up for me sooner. We're working through it together, and if anything, this whole ordeal has brought us closer. I'm cautiously optimistic about this new development. I know it will take time to rebuild trust and create a truly positive relationship with Rachel. There are moments when I still feel guarded around her, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I'm trying to approach our interactions with an open mind and heart. We're planning a family outing next weekend. A picnic in the park where Clyde and Rachel used to play as kids. It was Rachel's idea, and I'm choosing to see it as a positive sign. I'm nervous but hopeful. I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. Thank you again for all your support and advice. It's been a challenging journey, but I'm hopeful that we're on the path to becoming a real family. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and I wish I had better news to share. Initially, things seemed to be improving with Rachel. She was respecting our boundaries, and we even had a few pleasant family dinners together. The picnic I mentioned in my last update went surprisingly well. Rachel shared some funny stories about her and Clyde's childhood antics, and for the first time I felt like I was getting a glimpse of the sister Clyde had always told me about. However, about a month ago, everything took a turn for the worse. It started when Clyde and I announced that we were expecting our first child. We had been trying for a baby for a while, and we were overjoyed when we finally got the positive test result. We decided to share the news at a family dinner, thinking everyone would be happy for us. Eileen was thrilled, immediately talking about knitting booties and planting a nursery in the spare room downstairs. But Rachel's reaction was unexpected. At first, she congratulated us with a tight smile, but as the days went by, her behavior became increasingly erratic. She started showing up at the house unannounced again, often at odd hours. One night, she rang the doorbell at 11 p.m., claiming she had a bad dream and needed to check on Eileen. Another time, she showed up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, saying she was in the neighborhood and thought she'd stop by for breakfast. When confronted, she claimed she was just checking on Mom, even though Eileen was perfectly fine. Things escalated when Rachel started rearranging things in our part of the house. She claimed she was baby-proofing, but it felt more like she was trying to assert control over our space. She moved our furniture around, saying certain arrangements were safer for a baby. She even went through our kitchen cabinets, lecturing us about the dangers of certain cleaning products. When I asked her to stop, she accused me of being ungrateful and hormonal. She said she was just trying to help and that I clearly didn't know anything about raising children. It was like all the progress we had made over the past few months had vanished overnight. The final straw came last week. I came home from work early due to morning sickness and found Rachel in our bedroom going through our closet. She claimed she was looking for some old baby clothes she thought Eileen had stored there, but I knew that wasn't true. We had already gone through everything when we moved in. I asked Rachel to leave, trying to stay calm despite my growing frustration, but instead of leaving, she became hysterical. She started yelling about how this was her family's house and that I had no right to kick her out. She even went as far as to say that she should be the one having a baby in this house, not me. She ranted about how she had grown up here, how she had always imagined raising her children in this house, and how unfair it was that I was taking over her family home. Clyde came home in the middle of this confrontation and was furious. He firmly told Rachel to leave and not come back until she could respect our privacy and boundaries. Rachel left in tears, but not before warning that we'd regret this. Since then, Rachel has been calling Eileen constantly, trying to turn her against us. She's been telling Eileen that we're pushing her out of the family, that we don't want her to be involved in the baby's life. She's also been posting vague, passive-aggressive comments on social media about fake family and home wreckers. Eileen is caught in the middle again, torn between her love for all her children, including the one on the way. She's been trying to mediate, but it's clear that the stress is taking a toll on her. Clyde and I are worried about the effect all this drama is having on her health. Clyde and I are at a loss. We love this house and don't want to leave Eileen, but we're seriously considering moving out for the sake of our mental health and our unborn child. We're worried about the stress this is causing the baby, and we don't want our child growing up in such a toxic environment. We're planning to have another conversation with Eileen about the situation. We're hoping she'll understand and perhaps consider asking Rachel to seek professional help. Rachel's behavior seems to have escalated beyond simple sibling rivalry or fear of change. We're concerned that there might be deeper issues at play. If things don't improve, we might have to make the difficult decision to move out. The thought breaks our hearts. We love this house and the life we've built here, but our baby has to be our priority now. I'll update again when we have more news. Thank you all for your continued support during this challenging time. Update 3. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and a lot has changed. I'm now 20 weeks pregnant, and we recently found out we're having a little girl. Despite the joy of this news, the situation with Rachel has continued to deteriorate. After our last confrontation, Rachel's behavior became even more erratic. She started sending us long, rambling emails in the middle of the night, alternating between apologies and accusations. One moment she'd be begging for forgiveness. The next she'd be blaming me for ruining her family. She would show up at our workplaces, causing scenes and embarrassing us in front of our colleagues. My boss had to ask her to leave twice, and I was mortified. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. Clyde and I came home from a doctor's appointment where we had our 20-week scan. We were excited to share the ultrasound pictures with Eileen, but when we walked in, we found Rachel in our kitchen cooking dinner as if nothing was wrong. Eileen was sitting at the table looking uncomfortable. When we asked what was going on, Rachel announced that she had decided to move back in to help take care of Mom and the baby. We were shocked. Clyde immediately told Rachel that this was not happening, but she refused to listen. She started ranting about how this was her family home and she had more right to be there than I did. In the heat of the moment, she let slip that she had been planning to move in for weeks and had already started moving some of her things into the basement. That's when Eileen finally spoke up. She admitted that Rachel had been pressuring her to agree to this arrangement, even going as far as to threaten to cut off contact if Eileen didn't comply. Eileen had been too afraid of losing her daughter to say no, but she was clearly distressed by the whole situation. Seeing how upset his mother was seemed to snap Clyde into action. He calmly but firmly told Rachel that she needed to leave immediately or he would call the police. Rachel exploded, screaming and throwing things. In her rage, she accidentally knocked over Eileen, who fell and hit her head on the kitchen counter. The next few hours were a blur of ambulances, police, and hospital waiting rooms. Thankfully, Eileen was okay, just a mild concussion. But the incident was a wake-up call for everyone. While at the hospital, we learned that Rachel had been struggling with some mental health issues and had recently stopped taking her medication without consulting her doctor. This explained some of her erratic behavior, but it didn't excuse it. In the aftermath of this incident, we've made some big decisions. We've taken out a restraining order against Rachel. It breaks our hearts to do this, but we need to prioritize our safety and the safety of our unborn child. Eileen has agreed to seek therapy to help her deal with the situation and set healthier boundaries with Rachel. We're working with Rachel's husband, Tom, to ensure she gets the help she needs. He's been incredibly supportive and apologetic about the whole situation. We've decided to stay in the house for now. Eileen needs our support, and we don't want to uproot our lives because of Rachel's actions. We're converting the basement into a small apartment for Eileen, giving her more independence while still keeping her close. It's been a challenging few months, but we're hopeful that these changes will lead to a more peaceful future. We're focusing on preparing for our daughter's arrival and creating a loving, stable home for her. Thank you all for your support throughout this difficult journey. Your advice and kind words have been a source of strength for us. We're looking forward to the next chapter of our lives, hopefully with less drama and more joy. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My fiancé's toxic family slowly destroys her mental and emotional well-being. I must delay our wedding until firm boundaries are established. I've been dating my fiancé for 4 years, and I've been engaged for 7 months. We are trying to plan a wedding for next fall. Her childhood was terrible and abusive, to put it mildly. Her parents were raging narcissists, and she was the scapegoat for her 2 brothers. She was abused and thrown out the moment she turned 18. She was, however, a great student and hard worker, so with some scholarships and a part-time job, she has a great career and is pretty independent. The problem is, though, that she still has contact with her family. None of them have changed. Well, actually, something has changed. They have become more financially dependent on her. They enjoy slowly creeping back into her life and emotionally blackmailing her for support or whatever she can do. They're not pleasant about it either. They're rude, smug, and generally enjoy being a nuisance, and my fiancé can't say no, no matter the horrible things they say or how they outright try and intimidate her openly. I've always known her family history, and I've always supported her through the issues with them, but in the last year or so they've become far more brazen and asinine. They come over to our house more often. They make messes all around the place. Her mother acts like she's the stepmother from Cinderella. Her dad drinks all my beer and empties out half the fridge. Her brother stops by occasionally to act as mouthpieces for their parents. They practically trash the place and leave us to clean the mess. And where is my fiancé in all this? Quietly standing in the corner, practically shaking. I'm no fool here. There is legitimate trauma. There's her need to feel loved by them, and her hoping they will appreciate her. Before one of you noble commenters states the obvious. She's been in therapy for this for years. I've tried to establish boundaries for nearly 2 years. I've been trying to push these ass clowns away, but this is her house. She purchased it, and no matter my contributions, financial or otherwise, will she let me have a say on who comes into her house. She's been beaten down mentally and emotionally by them for so long. She has told me recently that she wants to earn their approval, how they were right about her, how she needs to be better for them. I've had too many emotional conversations with tears and begging to count, hoping she will take the steps to get better. But she's an adult. I can't force her to do anything. I love her, but I can't help but feel so resentful of what she's doing. It's agonizing watching someone you love, someone who you know deserves so much better, openly destroy themselves for people like her family. It's been painful watching her cry herself to sleep one too many nights because of them. I've tried too many times to help her get out of their clutches, but I have to think of the future. What happens when we have kids? What happens when she is postpartum and invites them over? What happens if there is a medical emergency for either of us? What if our finances get tight and they still demand money? This is the in-law family from hell, and I won't be able to avoid them. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell her how I want to delay the wedding until firm boundaries are established. If she resents it, I walk. I can't do it anymore. I refuse to watch a slow death like this any further. Update 1. The night after I made the first post, I had decided that I was going to have a heart-to-heart with my fiancée about her family. However, she came back from work the next day early, and I already was off that day, so I initiated the talk a little sooner than I planned. Essentially, I told her how this arrangement was not sustainable. I did not feel comfortable marrying her due to how much involvement in her life her family has, and I certainly did not feel comfortable bringing a child into this world with them. I didn't want to tell her cold turkey. No contact with them, but strict limitations to start with on them coming over and what they can do around the house. I also requested couples therapy before marriage. She wasn't happy. She was just staring angrily at me while I spoke, then started yelling at me when I finished. She told me I don't understand their dynamic and it worked for her. I told her that they are abusive users who will bleed her dry, and I have never seen them show any decency to her. She told me she just had to work harder for them to appreciate her. I basically yelled at her that a parent's child shouldn't have to beg and plead and work for them to be loved. I finally told her that she sets limits with them or I walk. She was livid, and since I was living in her house, I was kicked out. So the past few days I've been staying in a hotel, and I've had my stuff taken out and put into storage, and frankly, it's been great. I am going to stay with family for a few weeks around mid-July, and after that, I'm going to go house searching for myself. I have spent the last couple of days relaxing, catching up on movies and video games I haven't had time for, and could go back from work to a quiet room without her family tearing the place apart. Yesterday, however, things came to a head. We have basically been no contact since she booted me out, but I know every Saturday her family loves to spend the afternoon over, and she uses me as a shield from their abuse. However, in a very petty move, I simply kept my phone muted all day and played disco music. I knew she would call back for help with her family, and at this point, pure resentment was kicking in for her, and I wanted nothing to do with her issues. By the end of the night, she had sent me over a dozen texts and finally 2 frantic voicemails begging me to come home. I decided to come over to check up on her. Long story short, she was sobbing in the living room, and when I came to talk to her, she was practically crushing my back, hugging me and sobbing. I gave her time to cool off and asked what happened. Long story short, her parents and brother came by to gift money from her and say horrible things to her. She wanted to have me come over to help, but I was ignoring her, and when she tried to have one of her friends help out and everyone basically said no, that it all started clicking in for her. She kicked her family out, but not before they said some utterly vile things to her. I won't repeat it. She kept apologizing to me and told me over and over to come home. I told her plainly that I had started to build up heavy resentment towards her for some time, and while I loved her and understand it was trauma and not her being outright abusive, there were major issues that would need to be addressed if we were to move forward. 1, she sells the house and moves. We make roughly the same amount of money and we will buy a house together. I am a grown-ass man, and I will not live in a house I have no equal agency over. 2, her family will never step a foot in it. They will never come over. They will be treated by me in a very threatening manner if they try and come in. 3, she gets a new therapist and we start premarital counseling. 4, she never makes me interact with her family. 5, we will go LC with her family right now, but make no mistake, we are working towards full NC on her end. I told her I love her. We have been together for a while now and have beautiful memories together, and I know she is suffering from abuse, but these are non-negotiable, and if she has a problem with any of them, then we have to go our separate ways. She told me she's realized for a while now that her family is toxic and unhealthy. She wants to make changes. She has accepted, but some of these will take a while to see through. For now, I'm going to stay in the hotel until I head back to stay with my family. She is welcome to come over, but I have made it clear her house is not somewhere I want to go. Her and I are both off tomorrow, so we will spend the day together and maybe go out. This is obviously not over yet, but I might not post anything else until mid-August or so. Update 2. Despite all intentions of not updating until much later, with the hopes of an improved relationship with my fiancée and her establishing boundaries with her toxic family, we are now broken up. Essentially, what happened was after last weekend where I left her for a time to deal with them herself, she seemed to finally grasp the situation and was open to changes, including boundaries and a possible move. We spent Monday and Tuesday hanging out in my hotel that I was staying in until I went back to my family for a couple of weeks. The other night, she was being very vague with texting when she originally was supposed to come over. She came much later than expected, and I knew something was up. She basically unloaded on me how I was abusive, controlling, overly demanding, and unsupportive. It took me 5 seconds to figure out she was repeating verbatim some sort of rehearsed speech from her parents, and to be honest, I was so agitated at this point, despite making a huge gamble on her, I decided to be a prick about it. I asked her if her family told her to say this. She said they suggested it to her, but she came up with it herself. So I asked her to explain in detail what I did. She said I was living like a parasite. I reminded her that I'm paying 50-50 for her mortgage, 50-50 for utilities and groceries as well. I have my own car. I pay for it. A job that makes just about as much as hers, unlike her leech parents who demand payments weekly and raid the kitchen on the weekends. I told her to try again with something better. She looked flustered and said I was trying to isolate her. I kind of smirked like a jackass and told her that I have always supported her many friendships that she has destroyed on her own because no one wants to deal with her family or be used as a shield like me. I was practically demanding to know at this point why she is so hellbent on destroying her life for these people. She just kind of shouted that I don't understand her family and she's just trying to earn their love back and was just ranting at that point. It's just so staggering to see up close. I have ventured into a few subreddits to get perspectives, and if you have any familiarity with them, you'll see how people who are victims of abuse by their own family can be so utterly broken by it that it'll wreck their brain to where they truly believe they are the problem and they deserve the abuse. Well, that's how she was. She was utterly broken and didn't want help. She didn't want to get better. She just wanted to get worse. It hit me like a truck, honestly, the realization. I really did feel like a fool for trying, even if it was what I was supposed to do in the first place. She was practically berserk at this point, and I was just mentally exhausted and needed her to leave before someone called the police. She finally left, but I had a few concerned neighbors check on me. Some of her friends are aware as they have messaged me checking on the situation. I told them the truth and that I just needed to be alone to think what to do next. Right now, they have revealed that she has given them similar rants after they expressed concern for her. One had even heard that she may be possibly at risk of losing her job. She is definitely having some sort of mental break from my understanding. She is now completely isolated. She is actually sprinting into a horrible, lonely life right now. There's nothing I can do for her at this point, and as selfish as it sounds, I'm just glad it's going to be behind me. Update 3: things have kind of wrapped up, but there were some loose ends. I completely forgot to change my mailing address, which I should have done ASAP, so a couple of important things got sent to her house. I had to go pick them up, plus a final couple of items I want for my move that I left there and decided I wanted to actually take. She was being difficult and not responding to messages in regards to them, so I had to go get them from her myself. I brought a mutual friend just in case. Thankfully, she was at least cooperative and letting me get my stuff, and it wasn't much of an issue. Everything else was, though. She had a lot of nasty things to say. Telling me she was already sleeping around. Telling me how happy she was now that I was gone. Telling me she's finally free of me. How she's going to be so much better off without me. A lot of generic insults and horrible things you would commonly expect from a nasty breakup. And you know what? It was so obvious it was a rehearsed script from her family. And you could easily see how miserable she was. She looked like a mess. Like she hasn't slept in days. The house was a mess. She wasn't even yelling. She sounded so exhausted and broken when she said it. She didn't even smile when she said anything. Just a face contorted in hate and anger. She was not the woman I knew anymore. That person was gone. When I was getting ready to leave, she was still going on. I was fed up and told her something along the lines of, Congratulations, your friends are gone. Your human shields are gone. Your engagement is over. Your support is gone. Anyone who ever treated you like a decent human being is gone. It's just you and your family. I hope you're happy while they bleed you dry. Probably didn't go like that, but something like it. She just stood there, literally just stood there and looked at me with indifference and walked away as I walked out the door. As we were leaving, the mutual friend, Tiffany, asked if I was okay. I reassured her I was, and I'm just trying to get myself set up to go home next week. She also confirmed that she hears my ex did lose her job for not showing up for several days and basically ghosting them. They're gonna try an intervention next week and asked if I could participate, but I'm not delaying my travel because, frankly, I just want a clean break. I know for a fact that if I stay involved, I'm only going to be witnessing the slow descent to either a full break or a suicide. I just can't do that. Despite all this, I'm actually excited for the future, and I have realized that I ignored way too many red flags at the beginning. Even with everything that happened, I know I'll be doing good, and I'm gonna be alright. I expect this to be my final update. I'm still in town until Sunday afternoon, so something could happen while I'm still here, but if anything does, it won't be exciting. She's proud of sleeping around. You did the right thing. I come from a family much like hers. I've watched multiple cousins evolve into the next generation of abusive a-holes. After once swearing they'd get away. They cared more about their family's approval than they did their mental well-being, and now they're miserable and just like their parents to their own kids. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.